Can everybody hear me? Can't tell if my Wi-Fi is working. Jamie, yeah? Okay, hey Dick, okay. My Wi-Fi is acting a little strange. So if I go away, I'll come back right back. Jessica.
Good morning. Would you like me to call the roll? Ms. Bowler?
Yes, hi, sorry. I think I'm open now. Jessica, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay,
wow.
I will call the roll. Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
Ms. Laredo?
Here.
Dr. Nolan?
Here.
Dr. Nunez?
Here.
Ms. Prado?
Here.
Dr. Solicito?
Here.
Ms. Bowler?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first Jessica.
It's okay, Kathy. You know, it's like,
Diana,
sorry. 2 years
Yeah.
into pandemic, why would we have internet or anything like that? I mean, why would technology function?
This is the moderator. It might help to turn off the camera, Kathy. That might
Yes.
help you have a little more juice.
I think I'm back, I hope. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In fact, I'm going to stop my video just in case. So maybe that'll help. I don't know. But before we begin, I wanted to take a quick moment to sincerely thank our past two presidents, Dr. Jamie Nolan and Dr. Mark Nunez, for so ably steering our board throughout and our meetings throughout the 2020 and 2021 years, which, as we all know, were so difficult and stressful, and where all our meetings were done virtually. That said, they both chaired the meetings. They chaired all these virtual meetings with fairness, respect, and professionalism, and I'm really going to try to follow in their footsteps. But saying that, other than my Wi-Fi problem, I also apologized in advance for any clumsiness this morning on my part during this first meeting. I really want, as always, all the board members to feel that they have been able to speak up and ask questions and that we hear from everyone. So if I miss your raised hand, either your little WebEx hand or your real hand, and haven't called on you, please just speak up. And of course, that goes for Jessica and Tara as well. One other quick update, and I'll speak a little bit more about it tomorrow during my report. But unfortunately, Judy Key, our third public member who was recently appointed last summer, had to resign from the board due to time constraints. And just very unfortunate. She would have been a fabulous member long term. But we're hoping to have a replacement soon for her. Finally, I just wanted to welcome, I think they're on, our student liaisons, Mandy Ayers from UCD and Christina Hugans from Western University. Do any of the other members of the board have any comments at this time?
Kathy, you're going to do great. You're going to do great, Kathy.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Okay, nobody has any comments. The next order of business is our public comment for items not on the agenda. And as a reminder, as we move into this area of items not on today's agenda, please note that in accordance with Government Code Section 11452.10, subdivision A4, The board, as an adjudicator in administrative discipline cases, cannot take public comment on any pending disciplinary matters. Accordingly, if an individual comments on a pending disciplinary matter, the individual's microphone will be muted. Of course, if public comment raises concerns about statutes under the Veterinary Practice Act, Medicine Practice Act, the board may choose to discuss those matters at a future board meeting. As always, the board will not respond to questions asked during the public comment period. And I'm not sure how many, let me see, participants are on, but it seems like there are probably quite a few participants wanting to make public comment. And I want to suggest that in light of the number of people, in the interest of time, we've done this in the past, we'd like to request that public comments not repeat statements made by a prior commenter. If you're in support of a statement made by a prior individual and your comments have already been made, please just state your name, association, and your support for the previous commenter. As you know, legislative hearings regularly use this practice, and it's a really good way to ensure that we can hear from everyone today. I think with that, if I could ask the moderator to open it up to public comments not on the agenda, we're ready to go.
Thank you, Madam President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment to access the features. We are displaying instructions for your reference. And please know that you will have a 2-minute time limit. I will give you a 30-second warning. And I see that we have an attendee by the name of Christy Lawn that would like to make a comment. So Christy, I'm going to click on you and it will give you permission to unmute yourself. So Christy, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, we'll try it one more time. So Christy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you. It took just a minute. Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Christy Long. I'm head of veterinary medicine for Modern Animal, which is a veterinary hospital company based in LA. I want to extend my thanks to the Veterinary Medical Board, both for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and for publishing the FAQs regarding the board's definition and interpretation of the VCPR. It was very helpful, but I've submitted additional questions hoping for clarification. I'd just like to give the board some more context on my questions here today that I hope is helpful to you. Our practices are open 7 days a week for the convenience of our clients. This has proved especially meaningful to them during the pandemic, as veterinary emergency hospitals consistently have 8 to 10 hours waits or turn away patients that aren't critically ill. Our doctors work 4 days on and a 3-day off schedule. When they are off, I need them to truly be off so that they are rested and recharged when they come back to work. We run an enormous amount of reference lab tests at our practice that we send out to reference labs. Sending these tests out for patients that are stable ensures accurate results and better prices for our clients. We encourage our clients to perform testing even when they perceive their animals to be well, because as veterinarians, we know that animal owners are often unable to perceive subtle signs of illness in their pets, and even on physical examination, there are many conditions we can't pick up on. Because of this, we often discover conditions that were not apparent and the client who lives with the animal did not suspect. At our practices, we always have a veterinarian follow up on results as soon as they are available to us so that we can communicate effectively with our clients and so that we can readily address issues and either plan for additional diagnostics or start treatment. Several
30
times
seconds.
a day, we find urinary issues, intestinal parasite infestations, and make multiple diagnoses for patients that appear to be normal. Our veterinarians need to be able to help these patients regardless of whether they are the doctor who initially saw the patient or not. In addition, I often have relief veterinarians working in my practices for a solitary day without returning for sometimes weeks. When we have additional information regarding an animal's health status, we need to be able to move forward. We can't suggest that the client bring the animal back in because oftentimes they can't, because we're booked out 2 to 3 weeks and people are worried about being exposed to.
All right, this is moderator. Our next request for comment is from Dan Fumini. And Dan, I have given you permission to unmute yourself. There you go, you're unmuted.
Am I coming through?
Yes,
right.
You have 2 minutes.
All right, so my name is Dr. Dan Fumini. I'm the instructor and coordinator for the veterinary technician program at the Santa Rosa Junior College. and also practicing veterinarian at Carrie Fino Veterinary Hospital in Santa Rosa. And so I have a lot of concerns about the changes coming to the alternate route for the veterinary technician program. I really want to just first state my appreciative nature for that the alternate route exists. It is a way for most of my students who simply could not afford to stop working for 2 years to go to a full-time AVMA program to actually enter our profession and upgrade their status from veterinary assistant to veterinary technician. It is a really important opportunity that we provide people who wouldn't have an option without it. I've been, for a number of years now, I've been told there's changes coming down the pipe, and I sent a letter, I believe it was on Friday, towards the comments to this extent. I see a head nodding, so hopefully that letter made it through. And so there's a big bureaucracy within the education system, and there's a big bureaucracy within the veterinary medical board, and these things don't always match well in terms of timeline. I'm very concerned about having students be caught in the middle between these changes, and in particular, the caveat that students have to take 2,000 hours of experience before they can enroll in their first course. They can't even enroll in something like biology or introduction to veterinary medicine before already having a year of work experience, which is going to lock a lot of potential wonderful employees out of our workplace. And so as the only veterinary technician education provider in Sonoma or any Sonoma surrounding county, we are the primary source for RVTs. And as you guys know, that the desperate need for support staff, the cut off this pipeline is going to have an even greater exacerbating effect on those pressures. And so for the third time, my main contacted the Veterinary Medical Board. When I emailed them, they stated they were no longer with the association. And so I'd be happy to if there's a liaison that I can communicate with about the timeline of implementation of these rules or our status to be able to comment. I have a number of hospitals that are happy to jump in and help with this as well. And so I just am trying to make a connection here so I can get the straight story on when and what is coming down the pipe. Thank you.
All right, this is a moderator, and I've been informed that our time limit has been upgraded to 3 minutes. So Christy Lawn, Dr. Lawn, I cut you off at 2. So I'm going to give you permission to unmute yourself one more time so you'll have 1 more minute to finish what you were saying. So Dr. Lawn, you should be able to unmute yourself, and then you'll have 1 minute. There you go.
Oh, thank you so much. I just had a couple of more sentences I wanted to say. I think I was talking about how it's just very difficult for folks to even get an appointment, much less suggest that they come back in to see another veterinarian when a new diagnosis has been revealed. In conclusion, I just want to respectfully suggest that the veterinary practice has evolved and diversified far past the narrow scenarios that the Veterinary Medical Board had in mind when they authored the Practice Act. With respect to small animal medicine and surgery, the Act is clearly written with one practice type in mind: a fixed premises with 4 walls that contain shelves of paper medical records where you open the door and the veterinarian is standing inside and is always there. The profession needs more guidance because the laws are, as written, just don't clearly translate into the multitude of practice types we now have. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. I appreciate you guys listening today.
All right, our next request for comment is from David Siegel. And David, you should be able to unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes. All right, David did indicate he might have to step away for an appointment briefly. So what I'm going to do is I will go on to the next request for comment and come back to David. So our next request for comment is from Dr. Michael Mano. So Dr. Mano, you should be able to unmute yourself. Great, you're unmuted.
Yes, my name is Michael Mano, and I have been a licensed equine veterinarian in the state of California for nearly 40 years. I've practiced in all areas of equine medicine and surgery, and have always maintained a role as a racetrack practice veterinarian in both Northern and Southern California. I'm deeply concerned with the ongoing complaints and accusations that are leveled at nearly 20 of my racetrack colleagues. I was going to comment on some specific allegations, but apparently the rules are such that I have to modify those comments. But the scope and tone of the charges that are listed on your website are extreme, and they don't appear based any knowledge of the standards of equine practice in this state. I can tell you that if you can suspend a license based on these accusations and complaints, most of the veterinarians that practice equine medicine in this state might as well hand in their licenses right now. Racetrack veterinarians are highly regulated. In addition to being licensed by the Veterinary Medical Board, they also have to be licensed by the California Horse Racing Board. And under this licensure, we are regulated both in our conduct and in the medications that we are allowed to use. I don't see how another veterinary regulatory board can overstep that of one that we are also licensed under. It's clear the Veterinary Medical Board needs to engage equine veterinarians in this state in a discussion of our practice standards, and we need to have this discussion immediately. I respectfully ask that you prioritize this as an agenda item in your next meeting. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, the next request for comment is from Langdon, attendee identified as Langdon. So Langdon, you should be able to unmute yourself now. All right, we'll try that one more time. Langdon, you should be able to unmute yourself. And it looks like you're on a phone, so that would be *6. Or excuse me, yes, *6. All right, we'll go ahead to the next request for comment.
Am I able to? Oh, did that work?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, just quickly, I'm another equine veterinarian, also licensed in California. I actually work in a practice of about 30 equine veterinarians. We are all California licensed vets. Our practice actually is not a racetrack practice at all. So I, realize that we have a very different sort of perspective than the comments that were just raised by Dr. Mano. However, I think we are also really, really concerned about what is currently taking place and how some of those rules and regulations are being applied to equine veterinarians. So I guess I mostly wanted to echo his comments, but also jump in and say, for those of us that are not racetrack vets, we actually also are incredibly concerned and would like to ask that, just as he did, that this could become a discussion item so that we can better understand how some of these issues are going to be applied to us, because I think we also have concerns that it appears that the way the rules are applied would be very, very difficult for us to practice veterinary medicine on a day-to-day basis. That's it.
All right, and our next request for public comment is from the California Veterinary Medical Association. So the California Veterinary Medical Association, there you go. It looks like you're unmuted. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Baxter, and I'm the Executive Director of the California Veterinary Medical Association. On the heels of recent enforcement actions taken by the Veterinary Medical Board, the CVMA has received emails and phone calls from numerous members practicing within the California equine veterinary community concerning the board's legal interpretations of minimum practice standards and enforcement of those standards. Based on those communications, as well as our own independent research and review, we fear that there may be a significant disconnect between the reasonable, sound practice standards observed by equine practitioners in the field and the standards to which those same practitioners are being held by the board. We are thus asking for 2 items to be undertaken by the board. First, we would ask for the issue of the standards being applied to and enforced upon equine practitioners in the state of California to be agendized at a future board meeting. Second, and as an antecedent to that discussion, we would ask for the board executive officer and enforcement staff to meet with members of the CVMA and the California equine veterinary community in order to mutually educate one another on the standards followed by both groups. The ultimate goal of these 2 requests is to syncopate and harmonize the in-the-field practices utilized by California equine practitioners with the standards and expectations imposed by the board. Without a meeting of the minds between this board, the body interpreting and enforcing the legal standards of practice, and the equine practitioners subject to that enforcement, the CVMA is deeply concerned that equine veterinary practice within the state of California already a profession in which the supply of qualified clinicians is limited, may be further gutted due to the departure of practitioners unwilling to subject their licenses and their livelihood to the vagaries of an enforcement framework that does not reflect the standard of practice observed by the equine veterinary community in this state. I thank you very much for your time and consideration.
All right, our next request for comment is from Dr. Mark Rick. So Mark, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. All right, Mark, you can, Rick, you can unmute yourself now. There you go, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I just, that was very well spoken, the last respondent, and I'm not going to take time. I'm just going to say I wholeheartedly agree with that. I do believe that a good meeting between the equine veterinarians in the state and the CVMA and also the BMB would be a very valuable meeting, and I think that it should move forward, and I concur 100% with the comments that have been made so far.
All right, our next request for comment is from Carrie Fino. Carrie, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. All right, Carrie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
From UC Davis. I'm the director for the Center for Equine Health here and a practicing equine veterinarian within the university. And I just like to echo the comments that have been made here regarding equine practice across disciplines, both racehorses, sport horse, and recreational use, that I agree that we do need a meeting to have further discussion. So thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. And our next request for comment is from Rick Arthur. And Rick, Arthur, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Dear board members, appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I'm Dr. Rick Arthur. I've been licensed by the California Veterinary Medical Board since 1976. I practiced exclusively on thoroughbred racehorses for over 30 years. Thereafter, I was equine medical director at the University of California at Davis School of Veterinary Medicine for 15 years until I retired last summer. The equine medical director is appointed by the dean and is assigned full-time to the California Horse Racing Board per Business and Professions Code 19578. They are, quote, the primary advisor to the board on all matters relating to medication and drug testing, the practice of veterinary medicine within the areas regulated by the board, that's the California Horse Racing Board, and the health and safety of horses within the enclosure. Prior to becoming equine medical director, I was president of the American Association of Equine Practitioners and chairman of the racing committee, as well as numerous leadership positions in the horse racing industry and veterinary profession, both nationally and internationally. My knowledge of racetrack practice is extensive. What is clear, and which was clear to me in my interactions with the California Veterinary Medical Board as equine medical director, especially after Anne Marie Del Manayo left, is that your staff has no comprehension of large animal ambulatory practice, equine practice, performance horse practice, and certainly not racetrack practice. Not every veterinary practice in this state is conducted on small animals in four-walled hospitals. The California Veterinary Medical Board regulations do not reflect the standard of practice, the high standard of practice at that, in ambulatory practice in California, which makes it easy for this board to play gotcha. That has to change. I recently wrote Secretary Castro Romero and DCA Director Kirchmeier requesting an investigation into the travesty being perpetrated by this board. Your executive officer was copied. If she has not shared that letter with you, she should. Thank you for your time.
All right, our next request for comment is from Robert Holland. Robert, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. Oh, and Robert, it looks like you do not have audio hooked up. So you can try typing your question in the Q&A panel, and then I can read it for you. All right, so while you do that, we'll go back to David Siegel. He says he is available now. So we'll go back to, All right, David Siegel, you can unmute yourself now. You'll have 3 minutes. And David, you're unmuted.
Yes, are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. A bit about my credentials first. I'm 64 years old and a graduate of the Stanford Business School. I have been a harness horse owner for the last 20 years and have owned about 100 horses over that span. I have 2 retired horses that raced here in California, now 18 and 22 years old, and they're stabled on Stanford-owned land. I served as the California Horsemen's Association board for 9 years, most recently as its vice president. I am also director of the United States Trotting Association, an organization similar to the Jockey Club for harness horses. In addition, I was a harness driver, retiring from driving in local ownership 3 years ago after driving in about 3,700 races and winning just over 500 races. Over my years at the track, I witnessed many CHRB rule violations involving the health and safety of the horse. There was tremendous pressure to look the other way and not make waves at the track. Enforcement was severely lacking, and I had qualms about participating given some of what I saw firsthand or was reliably reported to me. To be fair, I stepped away from racing in California due to other items in addition to the health and safety violations and lack of enforcement. However, the straw that broke the camel's back was when one of the horses I owned had a procedure done to it that was a 100% violation of CHRB rule, which ultimately resulted in the horse's death. But beyond the violation, which I reported, the CHRB acted in a completely unprofessional way, effectively sweeping the violation under the rug. The investigation fell way short of one that I thought that was thorough and complete, despite my ongoing attempts to internally appeal to senior officers to take a closer look at the proof I provided and to attempt to get other records that I knew existed to illustrate what I believe to be an epidemic of similar violations which put horses in peril. I filed a formal complaint with this agency once all of my avenues with the CHRB was exhausted. Most folks would have given up by now, but I have committed to raise the issues until they are properly addressed. I have even gone so far as to make myself a candidate for the next potential CHRB vacancy and to get more involved given my credentials, though this commentary might put whatever chance I had into jeopardy. This board must continue its role to oversee all California licensed vets to be sure there is complete compliance with their policy and rules, and to put the health and welfare of the horse clearly in its crosshairs, which include practices of veterinarians that work on horses that race in our state. I'm happy to answer any questions that this board or many members of the press might have. My email address is davidsiegel1958 at gmail.com. Thank you very much.
All right, our next request for comment is from Kelly Theresy. And Kelly, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. Great, Kelly Theresy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Dr. Kelly Theresy. I am a practicing veterinarian in Northern California for the past 15 years. And I wish I had something more specific to say, but I was mostly echoing Dr. Rick, Dr. Langdon, and the other equine doctors in the field for the statements that they had said. Thank you very much.
All right, and we have a Dr. Jerry Parker that would like to make a comment. So, Dr. Parker, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I've been an equine practitioner since 1976 and have practiced in California since 1985 in both racetrack and show horse, sport horse practice. It appears to me that based on the public comments or public documents that I've seen, that the Veterinary Medical Board has overreached in some of their actions of late. I completely concur with Dr. Arthur and with the other veterinarians who have called in here that the Veterinary Medical Board appears to me to be out of touch with equine practice and in particular racetrack practice. I think that to agendize discussion on this at a future meeting would be very important so that the Veterinary Medical Board could be perhaps brought in more touch with what the equine practitioners go through and how their practice is outside of a clinic. So just adding my consensus to most of what's already been said. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, Kelly Theresy, who has already spoken. You only get a chance to speak once per agenda item, but she did say she agreed with Dr. Baxter. And so we have a Rich who would like to make a comment. So Rich, I will let you know when you can unmute yourself. All right, Rich, you should be able to unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes.
Rankowski. I was an equine practitioner on the racetrack for the first 15 years of practice. Later on, I have been a hospital manager for a small animal surgery practice. I know the ins and outs, I believe, of both sides of both equine practice and small animal practice. I'd like to support Dr. Arthur and the CVMA's expression relative to the standards as they are written. It's a vast difference between what goes on in the small animal four-wall situation and what goes on in the racetrack and in the sport horse world. I would strongly support putting this on the agenda for both the Veterinary Medical Board to take a look at, and I think they should also include the California Horse Racing Board in this. I think the two of these entities could probably make a great deal of difference going forward in this issue. And I thank you for your time.
All right, our next request for comment is from Jean Bowers-Lepore. Jean or Jean, I will let you know when you can unmute yourself. All right. Jean or Jean, you can unmute yourself now.
I've been an equine practitioner for over 30 years in the Central Valley of California. I do work with a lot of racetrack, ex-racetrack horses or horses in training. I do agree that there is a disconnect between equine practice and the standards imposed by the Veterinary Medical Board and those in small animal practice. And I would agree with the comments made by Dr. Baxter, which were excellent, and Dr. Arthur, which were excellent as well, in that these regulating associations need to get together and actually speak with we, the practitioners, and determine what are the best standards of practice that we can all move forward and definitely stay in this industry, which desperately needs veterinarians. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator and Robert Holland, who tried to make comment earlier but does not have his audio hooked up. Simply wanted to agree with what the California Veterinary Medical Association said earlier. And I'm just looking through our request for comment. Our next one is for Russ Sakai. So Russ, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes. All right, Russ Sakai, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to reiterate my support for the speakers that have gone before me, Dr. Fielding, Dr. Fino, as well as some of the racetrack practitioners. I'm a board certified surgeon in Northern California. I work on primarily sport horses, pleasure horses, along with the concerns that have been expressed regarding a disconnect between the board and practicing veterinarians. I think another concern that has not yet been raised is the lack of veterinarians graduating and coming into equine practice. And I think it's difficult to recruit veterinarians, at the student level, especially when they see equine veterinarians being subjected to this sort of, what appears to be unfair treatment, or, being treated with a double standard by, a group of members that seem to have a not a thorough understanding of equine practice. So In addition, like I said, to all of the previous comments, which I agree with, I think the difficulty in recruiting young veterinarians needs to be addressed as well. And, you know, those concerns I think are important to consider. So thank you for your time, and that's all I have to say.
All right, this is the moderator, and that is the end of our request for comment in the Q&A panel. I'm just looking one more time for any raised hands. All right, I don't see any, so it looks like we are at the end of our public comment for this item. Madam President, shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's closed.
Thank you very much. I wanted to thank everyone for all the input today. In my opinion, public comments and participation are absolutely critical to the functioning of all our boards and commissions. Typically, our agenda calls, and it does, calls for discussion of future agenda items towards the end of the meeting tomorrow afternoon. However, given the interest in equine practice issues heard this morning, I think it's appropriate to agendize this issue right now for a future board meeting. And in order to have a productive discussion on the issues raised today, I'd like to ask CVMA and other stakeholder groups to submit a presentation to the board regarding their specific concerns with the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act statutes and regulations as applies to equine veterinary practices, and any legislative or regulatory proposals that may address those concerns. And I just wanted to say that now rather than have all these commenters have to wait till tomorrow to hear this. But Jessica, could you just put that down for a future meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank everyone for the comments. All right, now we're moving to agenda item number 3, which is a review and approval of our minutes from the October meeting. And I'd like to ask if anyone has any corrections or additions. I'll just start by saying I actually don't. I read the minutes and Jamie might, but and I really appreciate the new format on the minutes with the links to the live meeting links because it's very helpful. So I wanted to see if anyone else has any corrections or additions. Now I should be looking at everybody. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Oh, yes.
Motion to adopt. Motion to adopt.
Oh, motion. Okay. Is there a second?
I can second that. This is Jamie.
Thank you. Any discussion by the board members before I open up to public comment? Sounds like it's crickets. Okay. Then I think, moderator, if you could please open it up to public comment.
Thank you, Madam President. I have opened up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment on the meeting minutes, again, this would only be a comment on the meeting minutes. Please type that you have a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for comment at this time. Madam President, shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I think hearing no more discussion from the board, Jessica, if you could call the roll.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solacito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item is a report and an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs. And today, I believe Carrie Holmes is here to present that. I hope.
This is the moderator. Carrie Holmes was logged in earlier, and I'm not seeing her. I did.
She may be having my Wi-Fi problems.
Maybe. We do have Brianna Miller with us, so
Oh, okay.
let me,
Brianna should be, yes, we had heard that Carrie was doing it instead of Brianna, but Brianna's here. I am sure that that's what she's here for.
okay, so Brianna, I've promoted you. You should be able to unmute. And actually, she is logged in twice, so let me promote the other one just in case.
Hi, this is Brianna Miller. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Apologies. I'm actually communicating with Carrie right now. My understanding is she is in and ready to provide the update.
Okay, moderator, could you promote Carrie if you can find her?
Thank you. This is the moderator, and she is back in our list, so I have made her promoted Carrie, and I will go ahead and demote Brianna.
Good morning, and thanks for your patience. I did fall off for a moment, so I may have disappeared. Good morning, Board President Bowler and board members. I am Carrie Holmes, Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide a department update today. First of all, Happy New Year, and thank you. DCA appreciates all board members and staff who have continued to serve through a pandemic that has affected all of us in many ways. To combat the spread of COVID-19 and protect vulnerable communities, California has implemented enhanced safety measures. State employees must show proof of vaccination or be subject to regular COVID-19 testing. The California Department of Public Health requires masks to be worn in all indoor public settings until February 2022, regardless of vaccination status. And DCA's testing program kicked off in early October at DCA headquarters and has expanded to additional sites and home testing as well. We are working together to find the right balance of staying connected and productive while staying safe and healthy. DCA and all its boards and bureaus continue to look to the future and use lessons learned to identify long-term efficiencies and policy changes. Staff are working in the office to provide the most effective consumer protection and customer service while also using telework where appropriate. DCA recognizes the difficulty of planning for board meetings as the pandemic continues to evolve. On January 5th, Governor Newsom signed an executive order that extended the sunset date of Assembly Bill 361. Under the new order, boards can continue to hold public meetings via WebEx without listing board member locations through March 31st. Additionally, Sacramento County issued a local order on January 6 directing public boards, committees, and similar bodies to suspend any in-person meetings that might otherwise be held within the county and hold them remotely. After March 31st, we do expect that meetings will resume in person in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Before attending an in-person board meeting, members must verify full vaccination with DCA's Office of Human Resources or participate in COVID-19 testing. Board members, please don't wait until the next in-person meeting is planned. DCA requests that all members submit their vaccination verification by January 31st to allow enough time to plan COVID-19 testing for those who need it. I want to express my appreciation for the flexibility of board members and staff. We don't know what additional changes to the law may be coming, and we will keep you updated. As a reminder, board members have training and paperwork requirements. Each year, board members are required to file a Form 700 before April or face penalties from the FPPC. DCA requests that you file as soon as possible, and as a tip, I'll let you know the best way to avoid a lot of reminder calls and emails is to file early. If anyone needs assistance, DCA's filing officer and legal counsel are available to help. As always, Board and Bureau Relations is here to help, and if there's anything we can do to assist, please reach out. This concludes my presentation, and I'll hand it back over to Board President Bowler.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I have one question before I open it to the board. I assume that if the board members get in touch with Jessica, she can get us the link for submitting the vaccine
That's right. You should have received a memo, and I will send it out again. And there are a couple of different options, and it does need to be through the Office of Human Resources. So myself or other DCA staff can't accept vaccine verification. It needs to be Human Resources.
Right. Okay, great. I guess I probably saw that, but I probably forgot about it.
It was right before Christmas, so I think a lot of people probably missed it, but I'll send it out again.
And again, you're asking us to do this by the end of the month.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Terrific.
Kathy, just so you know, a number of board members have already done this during the monthly meetings that I have with them. OHR has been getting onto those meetings at the start of that meeting to share their vaccination card and check them off. So I believe at least half of our members have already done that.
Okay, well, I'll join that half then. Okay, great. Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Carrie? I'm looking and looking. I'm not seeing any little hands, any real hands. So, all right. I guess I do need to open this up to public comment as well, correct? Jessica, yes. Okay, everybody's nodding.
Yes.
All right, moderator. I think if you could open this to public comment, that would be terrific.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on the Department of Consumer Affairs update, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right. Thank you very much, Carrie. We don't need to vote on this report, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful meeting.
Thank you. Now we're to the point of our MDC report with our new MDC president, Dr. Dick Sullivan, former member of this board. So welcome, Dr. Sullivan.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I coming across okay? All right. The MDC met yesterday and the meeting was called to order at 1 p.m. During the chair's remarks, I thanked Ms. Christy Pawlowski for her service on the MDC as chair and her many years of attending the MDC, both as an RVT and as a public member. I also welcomed our new RVT member, Ms. Marie Ussery, and I congratulated Ms. Leah Schofelt on her being elected as co-chair. The minutes of the October 20th meeting were approved. Then Ms. Seifermann introduced the agenda item related to board approval of RVT colleges and post-secondary institutions that you have referred to the MDC. The background material that the MDC received was the same that was your agenda item number 7 at your last meeting. So the first action taken was for me to appoint a subcommittee to research the issues and find out what other governmental and non-governmental agencies are doing and compare that to what our statutes and regs say. It's a big task, but one that needs to be done to get a handle on this issue. To start the research part, Ms. Seifermann scheduled presentations from the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, which has oversight over our RVT alternate route program, and from AVMA's Committee on Veterinary Technicians, Education and Activities, which has oversight of the AVMA accredited schools. There is another agency that we did not hear from, the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges, also accredits RVT programs. Ms. Joanne Murray and Ms. Jason Alley and Ms. Karen Boya from the Bureau, which oversees our alternate route pathway, gave us some background material on their program. This is an accrediting process. They have an accrediting process to start RVT programs, and which are reviewed every 5 years once they are accredited. Their oversight includes evaluations of minimum requirements for the faculty, the curriculum, financial stability of the program, transparency of the program to the students, and many other criteria. They have they have facility inspections, 2 every 5 years, 1 announced and 1 unannounced. The facility inspections and student surveys are part of their compliance oversight. They also have a complaint division that handles complaints from students, faculty, and the public. And they also work with outside agencies to accomplish their mission. The AVMA report was presented by Ms. Rachel Valentine, Ms. Laura Lyon, and Dr. Paula Parker. They accredit all AVMA CVTEA programs in California and have been doing this for 50 years as of this year. They do both institutional and programmatic accreditation. There are 3 types of accreditation: the initial accreditation, which takes about 5 years, full accreditation, and probational accreditation, which allows the program to continue until deficiencies can be corrected within a specific time. Every 5 years, the programs are reevaluated with both self-assessment and facility inspections. And they also are required to do interim reports. I have appointed Ms. Jennifer Laredo and Ms. Leah Schufelt to this committee. They have a big job in front of them, but both are educators in RVT programs, so I am sure that they are up to the task. After that, we heard from Drs. Bradbury and Lazarshev on an update from the Complaint Audit Subcommittee. The committee is developing a PowerPoint presentation for expert witness training with an emphasis on documenting references to support their cases. The complaint review process is being put on hold for a while until the backlog of old cases can be caught up with. The committee will also develop a program like the medical board's training of expert witnesses, but will be using veterinary medical cases. The subcommittee is also reviewing subject matter expert criteria to see if there is a need of any updates. Again, another very busy subcommittee. Dr. Lazarshev asked to step down from the committee because of increased workload at his office. We thank Kevin for all of his great work on that committee. Dr. Sequoia will be replacing him on the committee. This concludes my comments for agenda item 5A. Are there any questions or comments?
I'm looking at the members here. Anybody have any questions? Dr. Nunez.
When you were discussing the issue of expert witness training, did the issue of the equine veterinarian oversight and qualifications of our expert witnesses come up?
That did not come up because it wasn't agendized.
Aren't the expert witnesses who review the cases?
What I'm saying is the specifics of what you're asking was not on the agenda, so it did not come up. It was general discussion on what is going to be used as training, and it was not delineated what's going to be on there, other than they're going to be taking specific cases in veterinary medicine. The meeting that they attended was put on by the medical board, and they thought that the training techniques were very helpful, but they included all human cases. So they are going to be looking at veterinary cases, and that's the task that they're developing.
And does the complaint audit committee, do they talk about practice types and minimum standards and all that stuff? Or is that
At
outside?
the present time, the audit committee and in the past have reviewed previously closed cases to evaluate how the process, how efficient the process is, how where the deficiencies are, and attempt to correct them. So the reason that they put it on hold for right now is because the cases that they were reviewing are old cases, and adjustments and corrections to the deficiencies have already been made on those cases, and the expert witnesses are using updated material. So until we get through that backlog, they'll then resume reviewing closed cases. They do not review any open cases.
Okay.
I see Dr. Bradbury's hand up.
Okay, hi. Dr. Nunez, I just wanted to clarify. So we hadn't received any of that public comment, so the topic really wasn't even part of the discussion yesterday for the equine practice. And we haven't specifically talked about or looked at like the expert witness, the breakdown of expert witnesses and where they fall in terms of the subtypes of practices. But I think that might be interesting to at least get a handle on and understand sort of, you know, where that who we have as expert witnesses. But we are looking at the expert witness criteria, which that may somewhat, you know, be part of that discussion. And then just to clarify on the expert witness training, we're just sort of piggybacking on the training that they received from the California Medical Board expert witness training to provide some supplemental information in the form of case examples. So they had a lot of human case examples presented at that training, and the veterinarians that were attended were hoping to get some real world veterinary examples of what's called you make the call. So, you know, was this a deviation of minimum standards or not? So we're not going to be developing a full training program in that regard. We are presenting some information with the PowerPoint presentation, but the specifics regarding the case examples are just that's just some case examples for them. So I hope that clarifies some of your questions.
Does anyone, I had one quick question, and I thought I remembered from our last meeting, Dr. Sullivan, that there was we talked about cannabis coming back, the issue of cannabis, some of the issues on definition, well, not definition, but recommendations and things like that. I know there's legislation pending, but going back to MDC, was there any cannabis? I watched the meeting yesterday. I apologize, but I didn't hear any discussion. I see on your MDC assignments coming up cannabis, but I just wondered where that was.
Yes, I'll get to that in the next report. It's included in there. Again, it was not on our agenda, so I'm not sure that it was formally sent to us by the board, but we're going to be addressing it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else have questions right now for this part of the MDC report? And I encourage anybody that wasn't able to watch the hearing yesterday, the meeting. It was only a few hours, but the educational presentations on the programs were very interesting for those of us that aren't involved in that. So thank you. Dr. Sullivan, do you have more on your?
Yes, I have agenda item 5B, and then probably after the end of that, you can open up for public comment. So we'll finish this first. So agenda item 5B is the MDC 2022 assignments. Ms. Seifermann has added this memorandum to keep a list of MDC assignments, their estimated time of being addressed, and appointed subcommittee members. This is an attempt to keep track of each assignment and to be fully transparent as to the process. Of course, it will be updated for each meeting and will be dependent on the wishes of this board. You will also note the request by Dr. Poehler to address cannabis issues, and he has provided a written request and references that are included in this agenda item. Yesterday on our future agenda item, I included a request to the board for the MDC to develop educational material for licensees and how to comply with the new regulations on veterinary compounding, CR sections 2090 to 2095, which will go into effect the first part of April. That concludes my report. Any questions or comments?
Thank you. Any members of the board with comments? Mark?
You have a lot of work to do, Dr. Sullivan.
I've got plenty of time.
Get to it.
If we don't have any more questions from the board, we can open this up to public comment now, I think.
All right, this is the moderator, and I am opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 5, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, we have Dan Fumini wanting to make a comment. So Dan, I will give you permission to unmute yourself. And Dan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Not so much a comment, but a question, please. I'm just trying to be able to communicate with the committees regarding the changes for alternate route. Is there any way to get an update on the timeline for when the proposed changes are going to come into effect? Last I was told it was going to come into effect in June 2024. Is that still the case? And is there just a contact that I can communicate with outside this meeting? I don't mean to take up your guys' time.
Well, if you want me to answer that, there is not a given timeline. This item was brought up and it was quickly determined by staff that we did not have all of the information. So at this point in time, the subcommittee is being formed to do the research as to what is already being done by these different agencies that I talked about and what our requirements are. So I would say that we don't have a specific timeline, that we're just at the infancy of doing the research on this. So I would encourage you to, listen in on every committee meeting, every MDC meeting at least, and I would address your questions and concerns to staff. I would address them to Jessica so she can get them to the subcommittee, and we will be addressing them through the process.
Jessica, do you have anything to add there that's...
Not really, just the small point that I think he has concerns with the pending rulemaking package related to RVT programs, and I think that the work that the MDC is doing relates to that, and they will be looking at that rulemaking package. And so while the pending rulemaking package does have an implementation date, that may be changing based on what the MDC committee recommends.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers your question. Do we have any other public comment? Oh, well, Mark, before I get back to you.
All right, this is the moderator, and no, we do not have further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now back to the board members. Dr. Nunez.
Yeah, I had a question for Dr. Sullivan in regards to the MDC assignments. At our last meeting, there was a request from Dr. Hazza about new legislation that was specifically towards the use of hemp products, not THC products. Is that considered? Does that fall under one of your assignments right now, or
I guess that's the information that you received on Agenda 5 includes some background on this issue, including legislation. Been appointed yet, but it's on it's just guideline.
Oh,
that's the that we're going to be discussing it.
I didn't understand a word you said. I don't know if it was just
Yeah,
me.
Mark, I mean, yeah, I was thinking it was my Wi-Fi, but maybe it's yours, Dr. Sullivan. It was a little
All right.
broken up there. Sorry.
Yeah. Is this better?
Better.
Okay. Line on the fourth item, the M will.
It's not better. I can't hear. Would it be possible for, if it's okay with Dr. Sullivan and Madam President and legal counsel, I know that Dr. Pollard is prepared to discuss the issue about hemp use, and I don't know where on the agenda it could go. And I think this is here as a good place as any.
Well, I don't know if
Jessica, Tara, I don't know if it wasn't on the agenda. I'm not sure.
It kind of was supposed to be, but it wasn't clear.
it will be. Can you hear me now?
Better, but
We can hear you, but you're just very garbled.
if you took your video off, maybe it'd be better.
All right. Okay, is that any better? Probably not.
Yes, it is better.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So we are going to address it. I assume sent to us from your board. I'm not positive, but we do have it on the fourth line down on MDC assignments, discussion guidelines update. So we subcommittee address the material that Dr. Pollard sent to us, if that is the of your board.
I think I missed that your hand was up, and it is up. Can you chime in here?
This is Tara Welch. Kathy, were you referring to me? You cut off at the beginning.
I was. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First off, I just want to note that the hemp statutes, I believe, are under the Food and Ag Code. So I'm not exactly certain how hemp products will affect this board and its licensees. Hemp's regulated very different than cannabis. So that's number one. And that relates then to number two, which is what the MDC is actually responsible for reviewing, which is cannabis guidelines. I suspect that in that conversation you could talk about hemp, because I think that the current guidelines mention hemp. I just want to temper everyone's expectations about guidance on the use of hemp for animal patients. But yeah, I think that if we're just talking about what the MDC is tasked with doing, we can have that conversation. But with respect to particulars, we would need to agendize that.
Okay, Mark, you have something else, or?
Yeah. So what I see on the assignments, these are guidelines that we have been told in the past that we need to come up with, and it's not specific towards the use of hemp products in veterinary medicine because that's technically not THC, as I understand it. And the practitioners that do use THC products also use hemp products. And as far as I know, we may be already allowed to use it. It's just a little unclear on. If you look at the minutes from last meeting, I think Governor Newsom signed into effect that hemp products can be used in cereals and creams and lots of different products. And so if it's that legal, then veterinarians may technically already be able to use it. It's just unclear. And so that's the point that I think it's a little bit different than the assignments that are on the MDC right now. So I'd like to maybe make a motion that the MDC specifically talks about whether or not veterinarians are allowed to recommend and prescribe hemp products. And if they're not, should they be? That's the proposed assignment for the MDC I have.
All right, does anyone, if that's a motion, excuse me, and I assume under that motion, they'd be researching what the current laws are, statutes right now relative to hemp versus cannabis or THC. Is there a second to the motion? Anyone?
This is Dr. Bradbury. I have a comment before, if that's okay.
I think so. I mean,
Since there wasn't a quick second, I'm happy to wait.
I understand.
So, and I just have my video off because my internet is also not working great. But I was just wondering if perhaps we could include in the motion just a general review of hemp and cannabis together, so that it's kind of one subcommittee, which would go along with the chart that we were provided, the cannabis. It could be kind of as part of that discussion guidelines. If Dr. Nunez maybe wanted to make a more general, like doing both together, I think it might be more effective use of our time in subcommittees. It's just a suggestion.
Well, my only objection is that the proponents of it feel that THC kind of like bogs things down because that's the more technically illegal part on the federal level. So they wanted to try to launch something with hemp alone, but for the purpose of just researching, I suppose I'd be not opposed to just lumping it all into one. But I want to be clear that they want to specifically focus on hemp and not THC products.
I wonder if we could make that a specific ask in the motion where we are looking to update the guidelines and have specific and separate out hemp and THC in our recommendations, perhaps.
Maybe, but the guidelines we were asked to make the guidelines specifically on how veterinarians can talk about THC products. And they just want to distance themselves from that as much as possible.
If I may comment,
I'm sure the wise folks on MDC can figure out what the intentions are.
Did someone, Dr. Sullivan, I was going to say something, but Dr. Sullivan, were you about to say something?
I have been working on this issue for specifically at the A level, and from our work, I think to separate hemp products, because in all cases, we're talking about CBD, which developed from E. So I think they are entwined. Really serious legal issues with FDA on hemp products used in veterinary medicine. So I think that whole issue needs to be.
Mark, would you be amenable to amending your motion to include hemp in that assignment? However, ask the MDC to pay particular attention a little separately to the hemp possibilities versus the CBD. I realize in the interest of combining and for the sake of the sorry, I have cats trying to move things around. Oh, now there's a cat. Come on, guys. Sorry. I can't even see you anymore because there's a giant orange cat in the way. Anyway, in the interest of combining, I understand the interest of combining hemp and cannabis in this because for assignments with the MDC, just to make it more, a little bit more manageable, but maybe just a suggestion that hemp be looked at in a more specific way or something.
I think the point's been made, so I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Did we have a second on your motion?
Well,
I can second that. This is Jamie.
yeah.
Just to clarify, Dr. Nunez, since there's been a lot of suggestions to amending your motion, can you just state for the record what your final motion is?
Well, I don't know now the way that you've asked me to, because they already have cannabis guidelines on their assignments. So when we have presentations of the MDC, oftentimes it's an opportunity for us to just kind of clarify what our wants are for them to discuss. So does that need, I guess it does need a motion. I'd like to clarify to them that we would like them to specifically focus on hemp alone products when they're developing their guidelines.
Jessica, does that make you clear on that?
I think a motion would be good to be on the record since the cannabis discussion guidelines are a specific requirement in statute and the hemp products are not. And so just for documentation purposes, I think a motion would be wise.
Okay, so I make a motion to, in addition to the guidelines that we've been mandated to create, that they include a specific discussion on the use of hemp products in veterinary medicine. And I think the word, well, that's my motion. I'm not going to add to it.
And that's seconded by Dr. Nolan? Or
Yes.
no?
Yes.
Any discussion? More discussion? All right, Jessica, do you want to call the roll?
We need to open it up for public comment, and what I recommend doing is taking public comment on both the motion and then if they have any additional public comment on this agenda item, so we can tackle it both at the same time.
All right, very good point. Yes, I know we need to do it on the general MDC report too. Okay, so we're opening to public comment.
All right, this is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on the MDC report or else the motion, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, we have a couple of attendees raising their hand. I'll start with Anita Levy-Hudson. And Anita, you should be able to unmute yourself. And you're unmuted.
Hi, my name is Anita Levy-Hudson. I'm an RVT, currently president-elect for the California RVT Association. And I was hoping I could maybe save you guys some time on this very, very complicated topic. Just to state that there was the Hemp Farming Act of 2018 that removed hemp as a controlled substance, which makes it an ordinary commodity. So it's not currently regulated in the same manner as cannabis. And many times hemp products are sold as basically omega-3s and 6s. So I was just wanting to give you that information to maybe help you out and save you guys some time.
All right, and our next request for comment is from Jeff Pollard. So Jeff, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. And Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself. Right. And Jeff, you're unmuted.
Great. Hi, folks. I wanted to just add that the definitions that we have in the previous and now current guidelines that referred to 2215, there is a page where these terms are defined, and it's important specifically to recognize that the term hemp and the term marijuana are differentiated solely by the 0.3% THC. And it's just easy to conflate terminology, but as the previous speaker just referred to, hemp is clearly regulated very differently. And the item that we would like to address is actually in direct following the recently passed bill AB 45, which I included in the reference material there. And I'll save more detailed discussion or answer any questions you all might have now. But knowing the process well, as you know, most of this is going to get meted out in the MDC, I would expect. Thank you.
All right, the next request for comment is from Pamela Lopez. Pamela, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Morning. Hi, good morning, board members. Pam Lopez on behalf of the Pet Cannabis Coalition. We will also offer comments when the board discusses AB 384 related to cannabis for pets. But I just wanted to speak up and share that the Pet Cannabis Coalition supports hemp-derived therapies for pets. I also want to point out, and I am not a veterinarian, but our president, Tim Hsu, would certainly ask me to point out, and he is a veterinarian, that medically speaking, the profiles of hemp and the derivatives of hemp in an animal's body are similar to the profiles of cannabis-derived products in an animal's body. So I will give you, for example, delta 8 THC, which can be derived from hemp. And don't take my word for it. This is an easily, search engine identifiable thing. But delta 8 THC can be derived from hemp. It is a highly psychoactive substance that can cause a sensation of being high in adult human consumers who are looking for that sensation. And so I would urge the board, and I understand and am empathetic to the directions that you've been given to develop regulations around hemp and cannabis as separate substances. I certainly understand that based on their differentiated statuses in federal law. But both substances should be given due consideration, both hemp-derived THC and CBD products and cannabis-derived THC and CBD products as potential and effective therapies for pets. Neither one, and I want to dispel the perhaps the false notion that hemp is somehow more or less dangerous than cannabis. THC and CBD can be derived from both hemp products and cannabis products. And we believe that both should be treated seriously, but that veterinarians and animal patients should have access to both. And while we respect and understand the differentiation in federal law, medically speaking, we think it's a little bit of a silly thing that has to do with the difficulty of discussing cannabis at the federal level, and that it's a little bit easier to talk about hemp because it is moderated as an agricultural commodity. Thank you.
All right, and our next comment is from Robert Holland. And Robert, I'll let you know when you're unmuted. All right, Robert, you should be able to unmute yourself. Robert Holland.
So most of the hemp for us and the horses, if y'all can hear me, is bedding types, which might be different than oral. You might have to differentiate that when you're talking about this as well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right, our next request for comment is from Gary. And Gary, you should be able to unmute yourself now. And Gary, you're unmuted.
Thank you for the time to speak today. We can talk all day long about the specifics and the science behind the differentiation of what is termed medical marijuana and what is termed hemp. And one could argue that they are very closely related, but at the end of the day, as a practical matter, they are treated as very separate things. And as the board knows, I have spoken on many occasions about the importance of veterinarians being able to utilize both medical marijuana and hemp. However, today's discussion is really, hopefully, is really more about the hemp question. Because of the bill just recently passed by Governor Newsom, the landscape has changed as far as hemp products in California, and specifically, in our case, hemp products that are made for animals. So I would urge the board and the VMB to really look at these as related but separate topics. I would hate to see a discussion about whether or not veterinarians can use, recommend, dispense hemp-based products get clouded by the years-long discussion that we have been having on the medical marijuana side. Again, these things are related, but they are separate. And for the purposes of the MDC and for the purposes of the board making decisions about policy, I think the wise thing here, the prudent thing here, is to do this in two separate pieces, so that way there's no confusion, the waters are clear, and we can move forward, at least on the hemp side. And then I am happy to continue to have the discussion with you guys about the medical marijuana side. But again, separate issues. That's all I have to say today. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
All right, this is a moderator, and that is the last of requests for public comment. Madam President, shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, back to board discussion. So we have the motion on the table right now, and we also obviously have the report. Is there any more discussion from the board?
I just wanted to make a comment.
Salcidos.
Yes, since I don't have that much knowledge about hemp and marijuana and what work had been done, with the guidelines, but listening to the comments, initially, I thought it would have been a prudent way to approach it, more of like an overview of the differences between the two, the way that Dr. Bradbury was suggesting it. It totally made sense to me, but after listening to public comment, I am a little conflicted in the urgency of separating the discussion. So I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be more of just the plan to discuss it cohesively and then having like further discussions separately? Or is that something that is going to go against the process? So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Bradbury.
Yeah, after Gary's comment, I think in Dr. Nunez's initial thoughts, I can see that approach as well. I guess my greater question is, since hemp is legal federally to be used and hemp products are legal federally to be used, and they're, I guess that means it's legal for veterinarians to use. What are our goals if we do just focus on hemp? What are we then being tasked to do as an MDC? So I guess that would be just my question to the board is what does the board, what do we want the MDC to do with the subcommittee on hemp?
Mark, Dr. Nunez.
I think that I mean, if we're saying that hemp is already legal to use, I don't think that most veterinarians know really the difference between hemp and THC, and so they may have confusion as to what they can, or what's the word, dispense, and what they can't administer, what they can and what they can't administer. So that would be my my request for them, is just provide clarification on that. We already have guidelines of the THC products, but just a little bit more clarification on the hemp issue. On that's the goal.
I like that. I think that's a good goal and achievable.
Thanks.
And we do have a motion on the table, but there is obviously the additional sort of instructions, or I guess, to the MDC. Rather, we could do two things: change the, vote on this motion one way or the other. I'd do a different motion to separate it out and have a whole different assignment for hemp. But we could additionally, I think it's clear that the MDC, we're asking the MDC to look at hemp separately.
I don't think, my opinion is, I don't think we need to change the motion, because all the discussion will just provide further clarification of what we requested.
That's what I was feeling, but I just wanted to make sure I got the sense of the board that you were all feeling the same.
Yeah, I am.
Dr. Noland, I see your hand. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think that Dr. Pollard put it pretty well in his letter. He said that he requests that we take a look, revisit and update the cannabis guidelines to specifically allow veterinarians to recommend and administer hemp-derived products, considering the many advances in research and current legislative landscape. So I think, in my mind, that's kind of what we're trying to get to, is task the MDC to take a look at hemp-derived products in particular in our guidelines related to those. Am I wrong, or is that where we're going here?
Actually, hearing the way you always say things so well, Dr. Nolan. I think that probably should be our motion then, exactly how you said it.
Well, let me clarify. Those aren't my words. Those are Dr. Pollard's words.
I'm sure they still sound nicer coming from you, I'm sure. That was a joke. But yeah, I think that's really clear, to include in the guidelines. Could you read that again, Dr. Nolan?
Yes, to update the guidelines to specifically allow veterinarians to recommend and administer hemp-derived products, So in other words, have our guidelines include a specific section on hemp-derived products.
Okay, so
I'm
I
not sure where we are, but Mark, are you and
like to,
Jessica, Chair, are we amending your motion to add those words now?
yeah, can I amend my motion to delete everything I just said and then replace it with everything that Dr. Nolan just said?
Oh, God, poor Tara's going crazy now, and probably so is Jessica.
My second, so Dr. Nolan was my second, so she needs to second it. Which I'm sure she does.
I second.
Yeah.
So since the motion has been amended, we would need to go back up for public comment.
Yeah, I realized I was just about to do that. All right, so we've got a motion and a second, and we'll open it up now for public comment again. Thank you, moderator.
This is Tara Welch. So I just want a little bit more clarification on this motion, because right now what I have is the motion is to delegate to the MDC review for potential inclusion in the cannabis guidelines, a section on hemp to specifically allow veterinarians to recommend and administer hemp-derived products. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I'm hoping that it will work that way because we've already been tasked to do the guidelines, so it shouldn't bog it down. It shouldn't have that stigma of being associated with THC products because I'm hoping that'll work. But that's correct.
All right. Now okay, so we're clear on that. Now I think we can open it up.
Thank you, Madam President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on the new motion, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand or displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for further comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. And I think Jessica I should ask, I'm afraid to ask for more discussion, but if there isn't, anybody who wants to raise their hand if there's more discussion, and then we can go to the roll call. And seeing no hands anywhere, I think, Jessica, you can go to roll call.
Dr. Bradbury,
Yes.
Ms. Laredo,
I'll abstain.
Dr. Nolan,
Yes.
Dr. Nunez,
Yes.
Ms. Prado,
Yes.
Dr. Solocito,
Yes.
Ms. Bowler.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We have the next item on the agenda is, and thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for your report and for all the work. The next act is access to veterinary care report. And, but I noticed we've been going about an hour, a little over an hour and a half. Would people like to take a bio break for 5 minutes? I'm getting some nods. So if that's all right with the staff, could we adjourn or recess for 5 minutes? What time is it? And come back at about, about 10:45 or so. It's a little over 5. Is that all right with everyone? Okay, so we're going to go to recess for 5 minutes or 7 minutes. I'm not sure if all the board members are back because I know we have to, some are hiding the video. But if everyone is here, hi, guys. All right, just checking in. I wish we were all at a table together, but hopefully in April. So Jessica and every staff and everybody, if we are all back, I think we can, the moderator, we can open things back up again and move on to the next report. Wait. So the next item on the agenda is the Access to Veterinary Care Committee report. And as we know, Dr. Nolan and Diana Prado are members on that committee. And I would turn it over, I think, to either one. Dr. Nolan, to begin.
I'll go ahead and then I'll let Diane jump in at all. Well, I'll get started, and then if she has comments, that's awesome. And Kathy, please tell me if I start cutting out or if you can't hear me or something, and I'll turn off my video, but I'll give it a try. So just a quick update, quick history is we had our first Access to Care task force meeting for the Veterinary Medical Board on October 12th, and then we did report on that in the October 20th and 21st Veterinary Medical Board meeting. And then on October 27th, which is about a week later, the CVMA held its first task force on access to veterinary care via Zoom. And that task force is composed of I think it's about 6 to 8 veterinarians. Some could make it and some couldn't. And then an RVT and several of the CVMA staff, and most of those were in attendance. And just to clarify, the task force charge is twofold for the CVMA task force. One is to produce a recommended CVMA position statement on access to veterinary care for consideration of the CVMA board. And then the second is to determine what the CVMA and the veterinary profession can do to help with the access to care issue and report findings and recommendations to the CVMA board. The first meeting was spent mainly with a broader discussion of what access to veterinary care encompasses. We looked pretty closely at the Access to Veterinary Care Coalition project and that executive summary, and several other resources, including the Align Care guidelines and the AVCC stakeholder recommendations in that document, the coalition document, were discussed. And then other topics that were discussed as they relate to veterinary care, access to care, including telemedicine, drug compounding, human access to care strategies, et cetera. But it was more of a broad, I think, discussion. And then the second Access to Veterinary Care Task Force meeting for the CVMA was held January 12th, which was just recently. And based on the first meeting's discussions, they had a list of 15 possible contributions that the CVMA could make to this issue. And the issues discussed that seem to be most related to the Veterinary Medical Board are as follows. So I'm not going to list all 15 of those possible contributions, but there was a great deal of discussion and concern regarding incremental care with the VMB and the difference between the gold standard and the minimum standard of care that is enforced by the VMB. It appeared widely agreed that we as a consumer board have brought these two standards too close together based on our enforcement efforts to date. And included in this discussion was educating veterinarians as to how to document incremental care decisions in the medical record, including decline services. The discussion also included Veterinary Medical Board's subject matter experts and their review of cases, especially how they go about assessing minimum standards versus reasonable standards. So I will be honest, it's I had to have a pretty tough skin because it was pretty pointed. But I do think that as a board, things have to get controversial and pointed for change to occur. Otherwise, we just kind of roll along and do things like we've always done them. And so it was really very healthy to have this kind of very candid feedback. And I had to kind of wear my veterinary board hat and then wear my access to veterinary care hat and try to kind of slip between two hats a little bit. Because I think a lot of what they said, we as a board, I think all of us want to really do a great job, and we really have a heart for the consumer and the pet and how we can, best protect them, but also how we can give them the very best access to care. And so we have to work together with the CVMA and our different stakeholders to try to do a better job, I think, of what we're tasked to do. So that was a very candid discussion, and I think that I would like to see us ask the MDC to examine our expert witness selection. And I know we have a committee that's kind of, I wouldn't say on hiatus, Dr. Bradbury, but actually, not actively looking at cases right now because of the backlog and because those closed older cases don't reflect the changes that we have made in our processes. But I think that it would be good for us to take a look at expert witness selection and training as related to minimum standard of care and incremental care, and report that back to the board. So having a little more specific focus, if you will. Also, there was quite a bit of discussion on our CCR 16 section 2030.3, which in case you don't have your book right in front of you, that's the small animal vaccination clinic regulation. And one of the sections, in that is subsection L, and I'll read it. If any diagnostic tests are performed or dangerous drugs are provided, administered, prescribed, or dispensed, then a valid veterinary client-patient relationship must be established, including a complete physical exam and medical records as set forth in section 2032.3. And the discussion really revolved around how unclear that is, because all of you as veterinarians know that any drug that we inject into an animal body could be dangerous. If you've seen a vaccine reaction, you'll know that that can be life-threatening. So I think clarifying what is a dangerous drug? What is a complete physical exam? And then also this, we do have these regs are being changed. I mean, that's in the process, and Jessica actually sent me the updated version, which no longer actually kind of refers it to a clinic. It's an event, we've changed some of the wording. But that subsection L is still in it, and it's not very clear. So I think there was a lot of discussion about how we can re-examine these pieces of legislation or regulation and try to clarify them and try to help the veterinarian understand what we mean and what is allowable and what isn't. And in fact, very many small animal clinics and clinics actually have, tech exams, tech vaccines. It's not an event, it's a day-to-day occurrence. And where does that fit within the law? And where, how do we define that so that veterinarians don't feel like they're breaking the law? As humans, we can walk into a CVS and have a vaccine or a dangerous drug, quote unquote, administered whenever we want. But veterinarians and RVTs seem to be held to a much higher standard if you really look at our regulations. So, and maybe Tara is much more able to define a complete physical exam and a dangerous drug. I actually looked quite a bit at our regs to try to find that definition, and I couldn't. But I think it's important that I think we should consider asking the MDC to look at this regulation with the expanded role of the RVT and incremental care in mind. And I think it also should be looked at with the VCPR requirement in 2032.1 considered too, so that I think we have to look at some of these regulations, even though we've just changed them. I don't think we have been able to keep up, I think, with really the standard of practice, as was said earlier by one of our public comments. It's really hard for us to keep up, I think, as a board with what actually is happening in the profession and what consumers expect and what veterinarians provide. It's been a challenge. So, but I really feel like the discussion of incremental care needs to happen. I think we as a board need to address incremental care more clearly and define it more clearly. And I think it's timely. So the task force also looked at other topics, including curriculums and RVT programs. They talked about the telemedicine definitions and also how the human medical profession is working on the issues of access to care and whether that's helpful or not helpful. It kind of appears to not be as helpful as we'd hoped. But I think my biggest take homes was that I think we as a veterinary medical board can really look at our regulations specifically related to minimum standards of care and incremental care and try to help clarify those issues. And I think that would go a really long way to helping with veterinary access to care in the state. So that's my report, Madam President. We have not set a new date. I think Diane and I, our schedules seem to be very conflicting. When she is unavailable, I'm available, and vice versa. So I think we still haven't set the next date for our task force. But I think there's things I would like to see us direct the MDC to look at now, and not, and as I've mentioned. So,
Diana, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Nolan, for also and participating in the CVMA task force. That's just for vets, strictly for vets. And the only thing I would add is, in our first task force meeting, we had great public participation. And one of the things that I think that we should circle back on and hopefully receive help on is gathering a list of clinics and vets, particularly in the state of California, where we're in, Southern and Northern California, that where they are, where they're located, so that we have like a map of where can people access vets in our access to care task force. So like Dr. Nolan said, schedules haven't worked, and it was like the holidays. So hopefully we'll be able to get another task force meeting and ask for more public participation. I think what's great about the VMB task force meeting is that we are able to include other animal welfare professionals to be able to get a bigger picture. But I also agree wholeheartedly and love the fact that we are relooking at regulations and how can we expand that to be able to get more access to care. So that's all I'll add. Thank you, though.
That's excellent, Diane. And actually, the CVMA task force did talk about that some as well. Though I think that I think Grant Miller probably put it much more eloquently than I can. But you can have a veterinarian on every street corner, and you're still going to have an access to care issue because of a lack of finances to see a veterinarian, and also other socioeconomic factors that just prevent, I think, consumers from knowing they need care and knowing their animals need care and that sort of thing. So but I do absolutely agree with you. I think that's something we should continue to consider and to work on. Yeah,
it maybe is something that perhaps like a bigger agency can partner or take up like a report specifically for California of what are the issues, and I think what are the issues that folks are facing in terms of socioeconomic transportation, right? Transportation is sometimes a huge issue in accessing vet care. And it's not like you can just throw on any dog or cat on a public bus or metro, right? Like, hey, I'm going to take this big guy with me or fella. So, but that's great.
And you reminded me another thing that we talked about in the CVMA task force was developing educational materials in different languages that we could somehow, have consumers be available to consumers that help them, and even having access to knowing where veterinarians are that do speak different languages and that sort of thing. So that was a really interesting conversation and something I think we as a veterinary medical board can help with.
That's great. Well, thank you, members of that committee. Tara, you've had your hand up. I see a number of hands, but I'm going to go to you first, Tara.
Thank you, Tara Welch, counsel to the board. You mentioned CCR section 2030.3 subsection L with respect to small animal vaccination clinics. That subsection has been proposed to be deleted as part of the board's alternate premises regulatory package that was reviewed and approved in November 2018. That package, pursuant to your rulemaking chart, is pending. But I just want to say that that's already been addressed. That's being deleted, so that's been looked at and taken care of. So
Well,
perhaps.
Terrace, the one that Jessica sent me 2 days ago that was the pending regulation still had it in there. It wasn't struck. It was not, there was no strike through. So how do I know what is taken out and not? I mean, that's a little confusing. There is no strike.
Dr. Nolan, Dr. Nolan, I'll take a look at it. I'm looking at what I sent you because it was in the most recent folder of what the board had approved at the last time they talked about it. But it also could be, were you reviewing it from your phone by any chance? Sometimes the edits don't show in phone, but I'll look into it and then I'll send it to you again.
Okay. And, that brings up another kind of an, a point is it takes us a long time, which we all understand, it takes such a long time for, regulatory changes to happen that it is almost impossible for us to be probably as responsive as everyone would like us to be. But it doesn't mean we can't keep working on it and keep trying. I think that's really important.
That's a good point that we all live with. Go to Dr. Bradbury. I think you were next.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. This is really helpful, I think, and eye-opening. I wanted to just get a little bit of clarification from you, Dr. Noland, on the expert witness criteria and the subject matter. I don't know that it actually was reported in this meeting, but it is actually something that we're looking at that's kind of where we've shifted our focus is to see what our subject matter experts criteria are. And so it's helpful to have this in mind as we're looking at that. And I think I understand what you're asking, which is to have expert witnesses that are able to reflect what's happening in all different types of practices rather than, just the, small animal practice in San Francisco, for example, but also people in rural California and in some of the communities that are lower income and struggling to have access for care. Is that correct in what you're asking?
Yeah, I think we've had this discussion before, but, there are other states that have boards that look at every single complaint as a board personally. And we have such a huge state with so many consumers. And so we rely extremely heavily on our in-house experts as well, because, and the staff relies on them as well, but there's a bit of a disconnect in my mind between us as members of the board and that process that happens to get a case, a complaint to the level of a case. We don't really have a lot of involvement in that as other boards in other states do. And so I think it's important that, and I don't know how to make this happen, but I think, how we get involved in selection of members of the MDC as a board. We interview them and we're part of that process. But we're not a part of the process when we select in-house experts, or experts for cases, and maybe there should be some involvement of some kind. I don't know, because what as well as I do, Christine, by the time we see them, they're several years old, and we kind of look at them and go, "Huh," what I'm saying. So I don't. I don't pretend to have an answer to this, but I think it's a discussion we need to really have about that kind of transparency, because I think in the past we've had some real issues with that. And anyway, maybe I've said enough, but that's when I think we need to have a discussion about the process and about the transparency of the process.
That's helpful. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind when Dr. Sakai and I meet and talk about kind of our direction going forward. And then you were mentioning incremental care, and I might have missed it. What do you mean by that? I just want to make sure I understand what you mean by that. And that's my last question. Thank you.
It's something as a veterinarian we all practice, because we have clients, we offer them what we consider is the best and most appropriate diagnostic and care options. And then oftentimes they can't afford it, or they don't want to do it for some reason. And so then we have an incremental care approach where we said, well, here's your, Cadillac approach, or maybe I had to say Tesla approach these days, and Lamborghini approach. And then here's, the Kia approach. And here, what can we do together to help your pet, right? But I think a lot of veterinarians are afraid to do that because they are afraid of the Veterinary Medical Board, and because of some of the cases that we've had in the past, where if they didn't offer that gold standard of care, or maybe didn't document it appropriately, then we come after them. You see what I mean there? And so educating people on what is incremental care, and that it is perfectly legal if it's documented. If an owner declines treatment. But I think, and oftentimes, I think we get cases where that discussion didn't happen, perhaps, right? And should have, but I think there's also times when it does happen, and then the veterinarian doesn't record it in the record, and that's an issue. So anyway, incremental care has a bad name because I think veterinarians are afraid of being,
brought to the board.
Brought to the board. Yeah, there you go.
So, I mean, I think that's great. That's how I was trained, was not like, we called it the gold standard, the gold plan, the silver plan, and then the bronze plan, and sort of just offering it and talking to people. And there's, the option of euthanasia, there's the option of at-home care, et cetera, and just helping to guide people through those options based on their means. And to me, when I look at the cases that we've reviewed, and the cases that we've decided on over the years, I haven't seen a lot of even though there's this perception that we're holding people to some gold standard, it really hasn't seemed that way to me. But and I feel like if maybe there's been a few cases that it looks like that, the vast majority are more, pretty obvious deviations from the standard of care that we're looking at. So I don't know because the things that come to us are not, they're the more serious allegations perhaps, but I think that there's also a misperception by veterinarians that we are doing this extreme holding to some gold standard, when I don't know, hasn't been I haven't looked at things and been like, occasionally, and we've sent them back, when we felt that way. I feel like there's this push and this idea, and people feel like that's what we're doing. But when I actually look at what we are seeing in the cases and what we are bringing people, veterinarians, the accusations that we're making and such, typically are not, gold standard. Like I feel like it's maybe not as big of a problem as the CVMA feels it is, and my view. So that's just another comment, but that helps me to understand. I just didn't know what you were meaning by incremental care, but I think that's really important for all veterinarians to be trained and offer options to people, because not everybody has $10,000 to do the surgery and the critical care and all of that. So thank you so much for your work, you guys.
Thank you. Dr. Salcido.
I thought Dr. Nunez and Jennifer were ahead of me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. I apologize. I'll go with whoever wants to speak.
Dr. Salcido is more than welcome to speak. If she's, go ahead and let her.
Oh, okay. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the discussion. for the access to care. You guys know how, like, I'm really much invested in this topic, you know, being a shelter medicine practitioner, you know, this is very close to my heart. And I appreciate the fact that the problems are being stated, you know, it's the recognition of the problems, which would lead us to hopefully solving the problems. But I guess the question that I have is for the VMB Access to Care Committee, what are the next steps for us in approaching, you know, finding solutions for the problems that have been stated? And also, what exactly is the charge that we are giving to the MDC with regards to this discussion of the access to care? One thing that I would like to kind of put on the radar of the folks at MDC, the difference between individualized care and population health. Because a lot of times, even for me, how I see it, when we try to do outreach in areas that does not have veterinary practitioners, even if we want to focus on giving really good individualized care, it eventually becomes more of like a population, you know, approach because of the volume. I have 2 veterinarians trying to handle 80 animals, you know, in a span of 4 or 5 hours. So that's just one thing that I think needs to be on the radar of whoever is going to be having this discussion. If we could just review what existing practice standards are becoming barriers to the implementation of the incremental care and good population medicine, maybe we should start there because as Dr. Bradbury had mentioned earlier, you know, eventually like the cases that come to probably the MDC for review, these are not even being considered, or you know, the approach is not really punitive, but the thing is the fear is already there. The vets do not want to have their names being submitted to the medical board at all, and if there's no clear guidance on what they can of how they are going to be practicing their medicine, and if the way that the regulations are written is being perceived as very rigid, then you know there would be a lot of hesitation for veterinarians to even involve themselves into more of like community service. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. And again, I have so much appreciation for the board having this committee and having this discussion. Thank you.
Well spoken. I don't know if you want me to respond, but that was very well spoken, Dr. Salesino. And I think that the equine practitioners earlier that today would agree wholeheartedly with you that, you know, sometimes, you know, I think our Practice Act is very difficult to decipher between population medicine and individual, you know, cases. And I think that the equine industry has fallen into a pretty tough spot because some people, you know, horses are livestock in some situations still. They're treated as livestock and population medicine is the appropriate way to take care of them. And then we have them in our Practice Act as companion animals also. So it's very, you know, I think that having a closer look at when is population medicine appropriate and when isn't it appropriate is a very good, very timely.
We've heard a lot of potentials to add to the MDC portfolio here, which is great. And somebody at the end of this will hopefully summarize this, but I think Jennifer, you've had your hand raised. I apologize for not calling you earlier.
I also wanted to thank the subcommittee, Dr. Noland and Diane. This is such an important topic, and it's really nice from an RVT perspective to see that we are recognizing that as it was mentioned during public comment, we may be out of touch. I recall several years back, we were discussing an RVT issue, and my complaint was that the regulations had been written before I was even born. I mean, that's a little bit outdated. So I'm glad to see that we are recognizing that. And I also want to point out that it's very difficult to rewrite the standards. So I agree wholeheartedly. The standards were absolutely written for a small animal fixed premises. I have been on a subcommittee trying to write standards for different types of practices. I was near tears. It is so difficult to be broad enough to encompass everything, but specific enough that we can understand it. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a Shakespeare expert, and some of the language that we have is so difficult to understand. So in the interest of transparency, I'm so happy that we're recognizing that our standards, need some evaluation. And to Dr. Solicito's point, I think she was discussing individual health versus herd health. Coming from a shelter background, I saw that so many times with new veterinarians. They had been veterinarians for a while, but coming into shelter medicine, there's that transition they have to make. So you might have a feral cat with life-threatening injuries, and they're running an IV catheter and full diagnostics. So that's something that's so specific. I know this committee is so important, and my hesitation from the beginning was, we recognize that there are these issues, but are they within the purview of the board to address? So my question is, who were the stakeholders at the meeting, and was there any shelter representation, especially from rural shelters?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of representation for shelters and rural. Maybe not so much rural as much as areas that lack significant, veterinary care access. So, I can't remember the term that they use now, but it's kind of like the desert. It's like we call them food, the food desert. Well, there's veterinary deserts in Los Angeles and San Diego where, there's thousands of people with no veterinarians right in the middle of the city, right? That's so they don't have to be rural situations. I think we have, veterinary deserts in the city as well. And you're right. I'm still struggling with that, Jennifer. And that's why I think access to care from the standpoint of the Veterinary Medical Board probably has more to do with helping make sure that our regulations and our statutes are clear enough and support incremental care and support veterinarians being comfortable with incremental care. I think that is definitely within our perusal. But I'm in the same boat. I'm not quite sure it's a very large and complex problem. In fact, we talked several times in this task force for the CVMA about why is it okay for some people to have the gold standard of care and some not? Why is that okay? Why isn't everyone have access to gold standard of care, no matter what your socioeconomic status is or your background? And so, those are pretty big, hairy problems that I don't have an answer to. But, I would love guidance. I think I said this at the last report. I think Diane and I would love to have some guidance from the board, because it is difficult to know what can we do as a veterinary medical board. I think taking a look at the vaccination clinic practice standards is a step in the right direction. Making that clear so that veterinarians that are doing these vaccine clinics aren't breaking the law.
I agree completely. And I did hear also Diane mention that maybe we could defer to a larger organization. But Dr. Noland, exactly what you said is we can write these regulations so clearly that the veterinarians are not hesitant. I've also read cases where a veterinarian was trying to help and they were, in essence, penalized for it. And coming from my background, I recall getting up on a Saturday, taking the dog and standing in line at the feed store to go get a rabies vaccination. And that was the only time that dog was ever going to see a veterinarian. So I'm glad that we are recognizing it. And again, I thank you both for your work on this committee.
Dr. Nunez, I see your little hand up.
the thing has been characterized by every subject really morphing into a self-reflective conversation about who we are as a veterinary profession. It's beginning to sound more like a podcast than a board meeting. But I'll make a quick point. We're such a large state with such a diverse group of veterinary practitioners. We don't have the luxury of having separate boards for our different specialties. And it's also challenging to balance consumer protection with how we provide oversights to the different types of specialty works that we do, including now this different standards of care that one has been talking about. The more requirements that we make, if we have different practice types and expert witness requirements and so forth, remember that that's all going to go on to staff, and staff is so stretched thin already. We're doing our best to regulate a very complicated profession. And the staff, I just want to shout out that the staff is also doing their best to try to do their job. I'm hoping that in all of these issues, people can be kind to our staff, because there's been some unkind things said. And especially during the time of COVID, everyone is stretched thin. And so the board does care about all of these issues. It's a tough job, and being unkind to anybody on both sides is not going to solve anything. So that's my shout out.
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry, this is Diana. I just want to, Mike, thank you, everyone, and also for all of us for caring about this. I hear everyone about, HSUS has coined the term the animal care deserts for places where there is no access to care, where there are lacking vets. And then I just also want to lift up, and part of access to care is how also do we engage more vets and help students that are graduating pay their bills, and have that also in getting more veterinarians and access to more diverse veterinarians as well. So I just wanted to lift up that idea. It's a lot that we're covering. I laugh, Mark, that it is like a podcast, and good. There should be discussion, and we should be continuing this on. And I'm excited to be on this task force with Dr. Nolan and set up another date. But I just wanted to add those things that also were in my mind.
Thank you, Diana. Oh, sorry, Jamie. Was that you? That wasn't you. I'm not sure who just.
It was me. It was Dr. Bradbury. Sorry. I just wondered if we should, if I should make a motion to task the MDC to identify current standards in the Practice Acts that are acting as barriers to access to care, and have that as a starting point.
Yeah, I've kind of obviously backed away from a specific charge because I realize I may not have seen the most recent piece of regulation involved with some of our, standards of care. And so I guess I was going to wait and see what Jessica sent me next as far as what they look like. But I do think that we need to, I would be even more specific, and I would probably look at, some of the 2030 regulations from the standpoint of RVT involvement and access to care. I mean, have the MDC look at those actual individual regulations, based on that. But again, I don't think I've seen the latest revision, so I would suggest maybe the MDC get a hold of the latest revisions that are in the process of being approved, and with that charge in mind, Dr. Bradbury.
I do have a question, Dr. Bradbury, for the MDC. Do you guys have, I would say, experts or people that are involved in like shelter medicine or like low cost like animal veterinary services that could kind of like voice out their concerns and what's holding them back in their practice of medicine? Because I just feel like I think the approach in the review of the existing standards is that how they become barriers to the practical application of medicine. As everybody knows, everybody wants to do good medicine. But when given the choice of what can be done, for the animal that's in front of you, sometimes there are subjective decisions that need to be made. And so I'm just thinking that if the right people are being asked, to review and look at the practice standards from their lens, maybe we would get a more appropriate feedback.
Yeah, you've made some really well-spoken points, and I just really appreciate your input here. So thank you. I think on the MDC, my experience has been that we kind of form a subcommittee of two so that we can meet outside of a public meeting and discuss the issues and review things and sort of start the process. But during the MDC public meeting, or potentially, I guess, kind of like with access to care, board subcommittee has have their own public meeting. I'm not sure that the MDC can do that, but during the MDC meeting, we could have different people present, their information or their experiences. So I think there's room for that sort of a discussion during an MDC meeting. We've had that, in past meetings as well, and maybe Jessica can clarify that for you in a better way. I don't know if that made sense.
I guess for me, all I'm saying is that if there's a way to include, the right people, and if there's an opportunity, I guess having public meetings and just like what happened today with the public comments for, the equine practitioners, that is pretty significant. But I think we also need to do work on reaching out to those communities to participate as well.
Thank you, Dr. Salcido. Dr. Nunez, your hand is still up, but I'm not sure if it's a real.
Well, I put it down and then I put it back up again. I have a new point. In regards to the motion that Dr. Bradbury put in directing the MDC, in our list of pending regulations, we still do have minimum standards for what's referred to as minimum standards for alternate veterinary premises. Would that be an avenue for these reduced barriers for some increased accessibility to veterinary care? Would that be part of that?
Jessica?
I thought that was the purpose of those. That came between the CVMA and the VMB.
So perhaps I think that Dr. Bradbury's motion will still work when we look at the current standards acting as barriers to access to care, because that would include any pending rulemaking that the board is doing just to reevaluate to see if it is the best solution for the concerns raised. And then that would also be if there's any others that they feel need to be looked at, it would be all encompassing of all of them.
So would equine practice be a under alternate veterinary premises? Possibly.
I mean, potentially. I don't think that's currently in the rulemaking package. But
And how many
if that's
staff
an addition,
members? How many more staff members would that entail?
well,
to know.
so another point of clarification, I think that the MDC will need is an actual list of additional items. I think we've thrown out quite a bit of things, and I just want to make sure that the board what the board wants the MDC to do, and then also the priority level, because you saw the list of the MDC tasks that they're already going to tackle this year. So if there are additional tasks, all I ask is that those tasks are clear to the MDC and just a priority level.
Okay, I say high priority on all issues. Dr. Sullivan can handle it.
Yeah, I
But-
sort of
but-
we've heard of a lot of issues today that are important, some of which may be wrapped up in other things that MDC is doing, but I do think we have to delineate what we're exactly asking of them and adding it to their plate. Once we do that, then obviously then we can get to the prioritization. So we have Christina, did you make a motion or was it?
I did.
Dr. Nolan. Okay, sorry.
Can she repeat it, please? Because would you mind repeating it, Dr. Bradbury?
Yeah, I made a motion to charge the MDC to identify what current standards are acting as barriers to access to care.
What if we limited it to the minimum practice standards for the different types of practice that instead of it being so broad, maybe we could focus on the new minimum standards for the different, I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the correct words, but we have the small animal mobile, we have the small animal fixed, we have the large animal ambulatory, we have the vaccine clinic, that I just talked about. So what if we kind of focused right now on those minimum standards and the new ones that we have?
I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Has her hand raised.
Tara Welch, Board Counsel. I get a little concerned when we just mention minimum practice standards without specifying statutes and regulations. So perhaps the motion could be to delegate to the MDC to identify statutes and regulations that act as a barrier to access to care.
I think that sounds good.
Is that enough? Okay.
It's just pretty broad, Tara, that's all. I mean, because you're throwing everything in it then. So is that focused enough for the MDC? Because, I mean, it just seems like that's you're talking about all of our regs and statutes. That's, I don't know, it just seems like a big order to me, but.
Well, we could limit it to sections of the regulations.
Well, it's up to, I mean, Christina, if you think you guys can take a look at the whole ball of wax.
Christina, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I'm happy to focus on specific regulations. I would just need some guidance as to what those would be.
Well, maybe we go with Tara's, but then as you get started, you can kind of focus on those that appear to you to be much more related to access to care than others. I think some of it's common sense, I think. So.
I think that, we know our intent based on this. So we would, that would be our starting place, is what we're talking about here with the minimum standards.
And Tara, does that sound okay to you in terms of?
Okay, so perhaps delegate to the MDC to identify statutes and regulations with particular emphasis on veterinary premises and clinics or other alternate premises that act as a barrier to access to care.
My motion is what she
I'm just
said.
trying to make sure that, okay. I'm just trying to make sure that this isn't about standards of practice. It's standards of premises or alternate premises. That's where your discussion is primarily focused today. You know, because there's been minimum standards of practice relative to subject matter expert review, and I mean, so I just really want to, you know, get this a bit more focused, so that so right now it's statutes and regulations with a particular emphasis on minimum standards for veterinary premises, clinics, and other alternate premises that act as a barrier to access to care. Thank you.
Can I ask Jamie, Dr. Nolan, there were other barriers, potential to review, to access to care in terms of minimum standards, incremental care, minimum standards that weren't related specifically to premises. Is that something else that we think we'd like the MDC to take a look at, knowing that everything ends up in a statute and a regulation?
I think one of the more obvious ones, and Jennifer, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is, you know, RVT tasks. I think that, you know, I think we, so yeah, there are other things, obviously. I'm just, I would really like to have the MDC take a look at 2030.3, you know, at some point sooner rather than later, but I think that'll come to the surface pretty quickly within Dr. Bradbury's motion, which I would be happy to second. So Tara / Dr. Bradbury's motion, or Dr. Bradbury's motion as said by Tara. How's that? And Tara, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a definition of dangerous drug somewhere that I missed when I was looking? Do we define dangerous drug or anywhere?
Well, dangerous drugs are typically defined under Business and Professions Code 4022. Okay. That's under the Pharmacy Practice Act. So we just always, you know, cross-reference 4022 when we're talking about dangerous drugs.
Okay. I looked and looked and I, you know, needed you, but. And then also, what about a complete physical exam? Do we define that? Is that, or do we look towards 2031 for that one? I don't know. Or 2032, I guess. Is that where we go, 2032 for that? I don't know. Again, that's something the MDC can, you know, figure out. But I felt, you know, I feel like I've been on the board a while and I was feeling rather frustrated that I couldn't find it, you know, but oh well.
All right. Well, we have a motion and a second to add to the MDC portfolio, this additional area. I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that and that everybody was ready to, I mean, if there's any more discussion on the motion, that's what's on the floor.
Dr. Nolan, keep a copy of the Practice Act on your nightstand and read a chapter every night, and you will become enlightened.
Or you could have one of those microphones that just reads it to you while you're sleeping, and then you'll assimilate it all. All right. Anybody? So this is the discussion on the motion to add to the MDC portfolio. And I can have probably Tara, I'm not sure who has the motion, read it again. Before we need to go to public comment first before we take our vote, right? I'm a little confused. Sorry.
Correct. Yes, we'll need to open it up to public comment.
Okay, do we want to repeat the motion before we go to public comment? And is anybody else able to repeat the motion?
This is Tara, Board Counsel. I'm going to repeat the motion. The motion is to delegate to the MDC to identify statutes and regulations with particular emphasis on minimum standards for veterinary premises, clinics, and other alternate premises that act as barriers to access to care.
Thank you. Moderator, would you mind opening to public comment, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on the motion or agenda item 6, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists. You may also raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. And it looks like we already have some requests for comments. So first one from Grant Miller. Grant, I will let you know when you've been unmuted. And just a reminder, there's a 3-minute time limit. And Grant, it looks like you're unmuted.
How's everyone doing? Thanks so much for talking about this. This is a great subject. This is such a proactive and beneficial thing for all of us to be working on. I'm actually really glad it came to the board's attention and then subsequently to the CVMA's attention, because it is linked to so many other things that we're talking about in practice. I really want to thank Dr. Nolan too for being part of our task force at the CVMA. I'm really sorry, Jamie, that you took the brunt of a lot of practitioners' just concerns about what's going on out there in the world. To bring it back down to the subject matter at hand, I'm concerned about the current motion on the table being more reactive than it is proactive. I think that while 2030.3 is definitely a section that we could look at, I don't think they're going to find a whole lot more in combing through our existing premises regulations. I think it has more to do with the concept of like, how can we expand what we're doing in practice to accommodate the masses? And it might not be so much looking at current regulations as much as it is researching options for things that we can do differently to better reach people. So for instance, we talked about the expanded role of the RVT so that like in something like a wellness exam, RVTs can administer vaccines and they can maybe do some preventative flea medication and that kind of stuff, which encompasses so much of what the public needs, but without necessarily a veterinarian having to like establish a VCPR right then and there for that. And this is all just stuff that we're thinking off the top of our heads. It's all just stuff that we're like, you know, what would we want the headlines to say 10 years from now if it were, the, you know, the newspaper we wanted to read. So I don't know if really the motion is really going to get us there in terms of, you know, what you're proposing we do. I would like to maybe ask the board, I guess, to dream a little and think about how can we reach these people that cannot afford veterinary care. The CVMA will hopefully have some more substance for you in regards to our findings with our task force as we move along. Our next task force meeting is slated for around March 16th. And we'll be having Dr. Michael Blackwell come and talk to us and kind of go through our list of what, you know, we're working on. And I'm hoping that maybe we can provide you some substance
30 seconds.
To share back and forth so that you'll have a little bit more to work with on your end, and so that we can work more tandem on this. So those are my initial thoughts, and I'll stop it there. Thank you.
All right, the next request for comment is from Ken Pawlowski. And Ken, you should be able to unmute yourself now. And Ken, it looks like you're unmuted. So Ken Pawlowski, you are unmuted, but we are not hearing you. Oh, okay. So let's move on, give him a moment. We'll move on to the next request. It's Alana Yanez. So Alana, you should be able to unmute yourself.
You hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So I just would love to encourage the board to really just think big too. And if you could even imagine if there is loan forgiveness programs that possibly the board could support or request from the governor, because what we really need is to really try and do loan forgiveness for these new veterinarians who are graduating and trying to determine where they're going to start their practices, or maybe encourage others to get some type of a loan forgiveness or some type of monetary assistance to open practices in like designated animal care deserts. I know HSUS has designated animal care deserts in the state of California. Best Friends has also designated animal care deserts very clearly in the state of California. You know, where these are is very well known amongst most of the animal advocacy organizations. What we need to do now is just try and encourage doctors to open up there and to provide services there. The other thing I'd like to suggest is that there are organizations who are actively providing care in these animal care deserts. One of them is Pets for Life. I used to work for them. I managed the LA office. It is still very much a successful program. Is trying to expand on programs like that. How can the board, how can the state expand on programs like that? The Veterinary Medical Board doesn't necessarily have the funding to do that, but they could absolutely use their voice, write a letter to the governor, you know, work with legislators to try and bring support to those programs, to try and get funding to those programs so that they can expand and do what they're doing best. You know, it's not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but, you know, it's just further extending the people who are doing the good work and doing it well, right? So there's two things: loan forgiveness for new vets and financial, some type of financial carrot to get folks into these communities, but also expanding on the folks who are the nonprofit veterinarians who are working in these communities already so that they can continue doing the good work that they're doing. Thank you so much. It's good to see you all.
All right. And the next request for comment is from Nancy Ehrlich. Nancy, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. All right, Nancy, you should be able to unmute yourself. And Nancy, you're unmuted. All right, Nancy, you are unmuted, but we are not hearing you. You might want to try typing your question in the Q&A. All right, so we'll give her a chance to do that. And meanwhile, we will go back to Ken Pawlowski, who wants to try again. So Ken, see if you can unmute yourself this time. Okay, you are unmuted. All right, Ken, unfortunately, we still cannot hear you. So again, you might want to try just typing your question out in the Q&A. All right, so I will go back to the Q&A and select our next person, GV Ayers. All right, GV Ayers, you should be able to unmute yourself. And you are unmuted.
My name is G.V. Ayers, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Animal Physical Therapy Coalition and Karen Atlas, president of the coalition, and the DVMs and PTs and RVTs and consumers that are represented by the coalition. The coalition has been sounding the alarm on the access to animal rehabilitation care crisis in California for a number of years. We did so before the pandemic, but the pandemic has made things worse, exponentially worse. Unfortunately, the board's recently enacted regulatory language further reduces access to rehab care by qualified physical therapists for animals in California. And we believe that's a tragedy, but there is good news. and that is that the issue of increasing access to rehabilitative services can be more reasonably, adequately, and safely addressed in legislation. And that's what we are seeking. That's what we are seeking to do. Legislation that allows a California licensed physical therapist with advanced certification in animal physical rehabilitation may provide animal physical rehabilitation under the degree of supervision to be determined by the veterinarian who has established a veterinarian client-patient relationship on a veterinary premises or at a animal physical rehabilitation premises or a range setting. Now, this, just to set the record straight, we're not looking to allow any physical therapist without any formal training on animals to be able to treat without veterinary involvement. We are not seeking direct access to veterinary care or for physical therapy care. What we are seeking is, it's notable that under this construction, the veterinarian retains oversight over the animal's treatment plan. And we have raised this with the Access to Veterinary Care Committee because it is an access to veterinary care. And what we would like to say is we would like for the board to consider these measures as a vital part of the solution to address access to animal rehabilitation care crisis in California. And we look forward to working with you in that regard. Thank you very much.
All right, our next request for comment is from Robert Holland. And Robert, I'll let you know when you can unmute yourself. Oh, I'm not seeing Robert anymore in our list. Oh, okay. So he doesn't have an audio connection. However, he did type in the comment section, how does telemedicine help the area being discussed? If you can see animal via video, it could really help. And I'm going to try Nancy Ehrlich again because she was unable to speak before. So Nancy, you can try unmuting yourself once more. And Nancy, you are unmuted. All right, unfortunately, Nancy, we are not hearing, we can see you're unmuted, but there's no audio. I do see that you typed, be sure to include a review of RVT job tasks. And then Ken Pawlowski did type his comment. The board's charge is to set minimum standards. Yes, ideally every animal should get gold standard care, but as guidelines are developed, please do not let perfect be the enemy of good. All right, that is the end of comments. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're back to the motion that's on the floor. But I want to, and it's been seconded. Just double check that there's no more discussion from the board. Looking for hands. I have to look over, like I say, a giant orange cat, but I don't see any. So, Jessica, would you like to call the roll on this motion? And I will say that obviously this discussion, and Dr. Sullivan's here, and obviously Dr. Bradbury's here, but it's very clear some of the broader issues that the board is interested in, and with the expertise on the MDC, regardless of this specific motion, we know that they will look at many of the things discussed.
All right, Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
It's good, not perfect. Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes. Thank you.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Right before lunch, we have the next item. We have our presenter here already is our presentation from the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. I think it's Ross Lalian. Is that correct, Jessica? Who is here. And he's presenting, by the way, on AB 133, the collection of workforce data. So I'd like to turn it over to him right now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Jessica, should I share my screen? Is that the easiest way to do this?
Yeah, moderator, if you wouldn't mind providing presenter rights to Ross, and then he can start with his presentation.
Sure. We actually have his presentation loaded already. So if the co-moderator can just toggle to his presentation, then I will make Ross the presenter and he can progress the slides.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Actually, here, let me do that just real fast. There we go. And once I make you the presenter, Ross, you can progress the slides on the left-hand side of the screen. You'll see a navigation bar, and you just.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think I see it there.
Yeah. So let me make you the presenter. All right. You're now the presenter and can progress your slides as you see fit.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present today right before lunch. So I'm Ross Lalian, and I'm the Research and Evaluation Section Chief in the Healthcare Workforce Development Division at the Department of Healthcare Access and Information, also known as HCI. So today I'm going to provide some background on our new Health Workforce Research Data Center and how it could benefit you, hopefully. So HCI is collaborating with DCA and the Healing Arts Boards as part of this effort. I'm looking forward to having a discussion about it today. There's going to be a couple of discussion points, then time for questions at the end of the presentation. So to begin, I wanted to provide some background or some context on how and why the Research Data Center was created. So Assembly Bill 133, that was last fiscal year, kind of graduated the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, also known as OSHPD, to a department, the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. That's what we're known as today. And one of the primary reasons for this change was to strengthen our data assets, in particular in the health workforce space. So our Health Workforce Development Division, we develop programs to address health workforce shortages and issues of health equity in the health workforce. So having high quality workforce data is essential for us. So the Research Data Center is going to serve as a central source of health workforce data. So we're going to work with different state departments and organizations to collect a robust set of workforce data to be informed about key issues such as the geographical distribution of the health workforce, both by discipline and by region. We want to be informed about the diversity of the workforce, the capacity to produce adequate amount of providers in the future, among other priorities. And we plan on creating different visualizations and reports to help inform our stakeholders, and key among them is our annual report to the legislature. So that report will include information on supply, demand, gaps in the educational pipeline, the educational capacity, employment trends, diversity of the workforce. And we also want to use this report to inform state policy to address workforce issues. So this licensure data is a really critical piece of this effort, and that's where that collaboration between HCI, DCA, and the respective healing arts boards is really important. So we're currently working with DCA to implement a voluntary workforce survey at time of relicensure, and that's slated to launch around July 1st of this year. The Vet Med Board is included in this effort. So as licensees complete a workforce survey at time of relicensure, this can provide us with extremely valuable insights about where folks are providing services at, demographic data about race, ethnicity, languages spoken, etc. Hours spent in direct patient care to get us some of those equity issues, retirement plans, among many other insights. And these data are then going to feed into important activities that HCI will undertake. So for example, it's an important priority for us to use these data to inform our stakeholders, and you guys are all important stakeholders in this process. So these data will be used as inputs in creating public-facing data visualizations, reports, and public use data sets. These data will be used as inputs in policy development as well. So we kind of think through workforce policy decisions. Some of the key questions center around what regions face significant shortages of providers, what types of providers, how can we bolster cultural concordance in communities that may be lacking. So these data will be key inputs in those policy issues and program development. Now I wanted to share a couple examples of the types of analysis and data visualizations that may be coming out of this research data center. This you have a better sense of what our future state may look like. So this is an example of displaying demographic data, making some comparisons and also trending. And this is specific to race ethnicity data for physicians in California. So the left-hand side donut chart is race ethnicity data for all physicians. Then we added a California population donut chart in the middle there to provide some context for the data consumer. So with that California population data, we can make comparisons about the racial and ethnic representation. And something that might jump out is that blue portion of the charts, which represents our Hispanic population. So as you can see, about 40% of our state population is Hispanic, only about 9% of the physician workforce is Hispanic. And we also added that donut chart on the right-hand side of the slide, which represents recent licensees. And these are folks who received a license over the last 5 years, and this to provide some additional insights. What that shows is we're kind of trending towards the right direction in terms of representation, but there's still that significant gap in terms of our overall statewide Hispanic physician representation. Something else to keep in mind is that this is one example of the type of demographic breakdown we could do. We could also do similar analysis by languages spoken, by age, by gender identity, by specialty, etc. So I'm going to move on to the next example. So this is an example of regional analysis that we're able to conduct. So what we're looking at here is a statewide percentage of psychiatrists by region compared to the statewide percentage of population by region. So the gold bar represents psychiatrists and the blue is just general population. And this type of visualization could be used as a proxy for provide representation by community. So doing a quick scan of this map, if the blue bar seems to be larger than the gold, we may be able to say this indicates a shortage of providers in the respective region. In this case, we're looking at psychiatrists. So, for example, the San Joaquin Valley, the Inland Empire as well, the percentage of population seems to be significantly greater than the percent of psychiatrists, which may indicate that there's that shortage of psychiatrists in those regions. The Bay Area is a totally different story. The opposite seems to be the case. The percent of psychiatrists seems to be considerably greater than the percent of population. And similar to the last slide, we can conduct this analysis by several different types of variables and at different granularities of geography. So this is at the regional level. We could conduct this analysis at the county level. We could even drill down within a county, depending on the sensitivity of the data. So this next slide shows an example of data trended over time. In this case, we're looking at telehealth hours for all specialties, but also for primary care and psychiatry. All three seem to be trending upward, but psychiatry really exploded. And demand for telehealth will seem to be increasing pre-COVID, but as you can see, after 2020, there was a big spike, probably expecting that, right, considering our current state of affairs. This is another example of the type of analysis that will be coming out of this research data center. And I think we're going to collect several different variables that will be interesting to kind of trend over time and provide those insights. So I'm going to pause there for a second. I want to open up for a discussion. And what I'd like to hear from you guys is, how can this research data center help you? You've seen a couple of examples. What's your thoughts on how we can provide value to your organization? We're going to collect this data from licensees within your respective board. Historically, we haven't conducted analysis specific to the VetMed board. So it may help me and help drive this conversation is hearing about some of your program priorities and if this data collection effort aligns with any of those. So I guess I'll pause there. If anyone wants to jump in, please feel free or raise your hand or use the chat feature.
This is Kathy. I'll just start. I know other board members will definitely have something to say. This is perfect, interesting timing for your presentation to come right after our access to care. It was, providential that it's on this. And I don't know how much you heard of our previous previous agenda item, but there are clearly your data and what you're doing will go a long way to helping all professions, but particularly ours, with some of these access to care issues, and to highlight where we really have problems. We know we have them in some areas. So I'm very excited about it. I have a quick question, timing wise. You're going to be aggregating all the licensees, et cetera, into your data set. When do you propose that you would have products for us? And that's one question in terms of for the vet board. And then secondly, what other things can we do for you to assist in this? Because I think it's a huge benefit.
Thank you for those questions. So as far as having products, it's going to take 2 years to have a full complete data set, right? Because it's based on relicensure. So that's the first point where we're going to actually collect these data. But I think within that 2 year span, like maybe after 1 year, so this survey is going to be launched July 1st. and then licensees will have the chance to update their workforce data. So I think maybe after 1 year, we could start having some products kind of pushed out, and that'll represent hopefully about half of the health workforce with the Vet Med board included. So we're thinking about 1 year, so maybe next year we can come back with some results for you guys. In terms of helping, that's a really good question. I have some slides about that later, but this survey is all voluntary, right? That's kind of leading into the next slide I have. So response rates are going to vary widely. And I think that it's important for HCAR to partner with the boards and with DCA to show the licensees why this data is important to get those high quality responses. I think that that's going to be critical for this effort.
Thank you. And I know we have stakeholders, I hope, still on the listening in, like CVMA and the CARVDA and things like that, that can also help promote this so that we can advertise answering surveys. Because obviously the voluntary survey will, is only as good as many people participate. Okay, I know there's probably a lot of board members that have questions at this point. Jennifer Laredo.
I have one question / comment, and you may not know the answer, but on this survey, I'm wondering how many categories there are. Just being multiracial myself, in the 70s, you could only check one box, and it's been very recently that on these surveys you had multiple. So I'm just wondering if that's an option for multiracial individuals to check.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to have about 40 different categories, and the Med Board actually has their own surveys. So we're kind of leveraging those categories the Med Board has. So I think the Med Board survey is public, so you can take a look at that. But there is about 40 categories, and folks could select multiple boxes.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yeah, my question's in a similar line, but when we're doing the breakdown, is there a way to differentiate what type of practice they're practicing at, just since that's one of the sort of, I think, questions to our access to care and providing care?
Yeah, so we're going to have the different specialties, right? So I want to work with you guys to understand what specialties we should include in the survey. And then we're going to ask the provider to upload their primary practice location and also their secondary practice location. And we want to be able to actually geocode these locations on a map to understand where the different shortages are. So if I'm understanding correctly, there's probably maldistribution issue with vets, right? Like some areas may have more, some areas may have less, similar to all the rest of the health workforce.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, so we're going to have that chance for folks to upload their address. I don't know if we're going to have them actually type in the name of where they're working at. I think that the address for our needs definitely suits our needs. If it'd be valuable to add like what clinic they're working at, for example, if that would help out, please let us know. But for sure, we're going to ask them to type into their address.
Yeah, I think what I was wondering is it do they work at a shelter, for example, or a low cost clinic, or a specialty emergency clinic? Because I think that's one of our concerns with the access to care, is that there's certain types of clinics that are potentially in an area, but those aren't ones that are, useful to certain individuals. So I just think, and maybe I'm not saying that correctly, but I think understanding or equine practice, large animal, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's part of the survey.
That actually makes sense. We're asking for practice setting, and I think that's what you're referring to. That's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to work with Jessica and the rest of the DSCA team and the Vet Med board to understand what those practice settings are. Because again, we just have much less experience, or no experience, to be honest, working with the Vet Med board. So to understand those practice settings, that's really important, because we do ask for that in the survey.
I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, and I think I was going to ask one question, but I think I understand now. So there is a plan to work with our board, and particularly the staff, to customize the survey with regard to veterinary professional licenses, so that we can gather the specific kinds of data that would be helpful to our board and to the millions of consumers in the state. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's 19 healing arts boards, so it's quite a bit, right? And everyone has different needs, different specialties and settings. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I think Jessica, you had your hand up, and I know then Diana.
Yeah, so members, just to clarify too, when Ross is referring to relicensure, that is referring to when they renew their license, they're going to be taken, they're provided a link to take them to the survey to fill out the information. They don't have to, it is optional, but we definitely would want to encourage them to take it. If the members are wanting to know what specifics are going to be in the survey, on the meeting, in the meeting materials, the agenda item has a hyperlink to the bill. And in there, it's listed in section 502B, and there are 14 different areas that we are required to now collect information for starting in July. And so for the rollout, like you said, there's 19 total programs that are going to be doing this. And so right now we're going to go with the standard survey that is rolling out for the Healing Arts Boards, but we're going to be working on, if there are areas that we can improve, then to amend the survey as necessary for the board.
Thanks, Jessica. That was really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think once perhaps I read over the subsection B, this could be answered. But this made me think of, I'm like, I love data, so thank you so much. I'm like, yay. You know, it would be interesting to know the salaries of the veterinarians and any loan amounts that they are still outstanding in terms of us being able to see, like, oh, what are, I know that as an attorney, it's for particularly nonprofit attorneys, public interest attorneys, the salary ranges vary and are very drastically different than private. So that'd be interesting to know in terms of vets. And then also, are RVTs included in part of this was my other question.
RBTs?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that. I'm sorry, that acronym.
Oh, no. Yeah, of course, because all we do is acronyms here. I'm a registered veterinary technician. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay, I think if RVTs go to this licensure process through the DCA, then that absolutely will be included, and we'll kind of break that out as a respective specialty. In terms of salaries and loan amounts, I think right now the plan is to not include that, but I think like every year we're probably going to go back and reassess what our different needs are and add it to survey. So I think in the future we're not going to say no to that. For this first initial rollout, we're probably not going to include that for now.
No problem. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Yeah, I assume we'll all go back and look at 502B to see what that minimum 14 elements are or whatever. Does anybody else have any more questions?
If it's helpful, I'm happy to just read it off real quick so you guys know. Would you like me to do that? Sure. So started in July, we'll be collecting the anticipated year of retirement, area of practice or specialty, city, county, and zip code of practice, date of birth, educational background, and the highest level attained at time of licensure registration, gender or gender identity, hours spent in direct patient care, including telehealth hours as a subcategory, training, research, and administration, languages spoken, national provider identifier, race or ethnicity, type of employer, classification of primary practice site among the types of practice sites specified by the board, including but not limited to clinic, hospital, managed care organizations, or private practice, work hours, sexual orientation, and disability status.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Now, Ross, I know you still are continuing with your presentation, but if the board's finished with their initial questions, turn it back over to you.
Okay. So a couple more slides. So thanks for that feedback, and I think it's a perfect segue, excuse me, because like as we mentioned, this workforce survey is totally voluntary. So the licensees don't have to provide an answer to us, and this leads to those response rate issues that vary widely by variable and by board. So we've collected data historically for other healing arts boards, and we developed this matrix here that shows response rates on race, ethnicity, and languages spoken, which are two very important variables for us to collect. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner there, that's yes, yes. That means we receive data on both languages spoken and race, ethnicity from the licensee. That happens about 30% of the time. Conversely, in the top left, we have our no category, which means we didn't receive data on either race, ethnicity, or languages spoken. And unfortunately, that happens about half the time. So for us to be able to conduct a meaningful analysis and feel confident about it, we're aiming for much higher response rate consistently across the healing arts boards. This will also help us combat non-response bias, and that's an issue in survey analysis when folks that don't respond to a survey differ in a meaningful way compared to responders. So for example, a licensee that only speaks English may be less likely to answer the language question instead of indicating that they only speak English, and that could potentially skew our data and impact our analysis. And I think we kind of started this discussion already, but the next discussion point is what opportunities do we have to encourage licensees to submit responses to the survey? This is an area where HCI really sees value in collaborating with you to help licensees understand kind of the purpose of this data collection, why it's important, what may be in it for them. So are there opportunities to communicate with licensees, and are there advocacy groups or other methods to encourage high response rates? And if I opened up just a quick example, the Board of Psychology, they have a spring newsletter that we added this, a couple paragraphs to just inform licensees, hey, this survey is upcoming. This is why it's important. So I'm going to pause there and open it up.
Thank you. Yeah, I was already thinking of all of that, and I'm sure Jessica's already planned for it. We do have a number of publications from the board that are available and that go out, including a newsletter and licensee publications. And there are other stakeholders involved, like we said, CVMA and the RVT, CARVDA, and some of those associations that also we might be able to ask to continue to advertise for this. I'll turn, Jessica, do you have anything on this? And I'll see if any of the other board members.
Yeah, I just want to really thank Ross for coming. This is actually, he had presented to a bunch of the Healing Art VOs, was it last month? And we had provided similar feedback where we had requested information to be put into our newsletters. We obviously want to partner with the associations to get the word out. Our social media pages, we think it's really important to collect this data. We do think it's very timely for the discussions that we're having and looking at the whole access to care issue. So those are some things that we've already said that we're definitely willing to do, and we want to partner with the associations to encourage the licensees to take this survey. One thing I did want to clarify too, just to let everybody know that the data itself was not going to be housed by DCA. I think that's important to know. And the data itself is very confidential. So the information we get won't be tied to specific licensees. And that's not, again, since it's not data that we're housing, it wouldn't be subject to any kind of PRAs or anything like that. It's confidential information housed by HCI.
I would assume that statement alone and that fact alone put into our publications, et cetera, might hopefully encourage folks to participate, knowing that their information was confidential.
Okay, absolutely. I just have kind of one last slide to wrap up this discussion. It's about next steps. So we at HCI, we view this as kind of the first step in a continued partnership with you and with DCA. So we want to come back and present at future board meetings, for example, once we have some of these results in analysis, maybe 1 year from now or so. And thank you all for talking about the newsletter and other publications. We could also discuss this survey and to kind of encourage these licensees to respond. So if you have any other ideas about collaboration or any other questions, I'm happy to answer it at this point. And I think that is my last slide.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
But open to the board members for any questions you might have. But we are looking forward to hearing from you again.
Okay. Thank you.
This is very exciting. Dr. Bradbury.
I'm sorry to always have questions. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm really excited that we're included in this this whole process. I think it's going to be really helpful to us. When I was reading over the bill, there was some other aspects of it that, and I didn't read the whole thing, obviously, because I missed that one spot. It's pretty long. But there was some other kind of aspects, and it may not be your department, where parts of the department were charged with like grants and ways to encourage licensees. This was in the more in human medicine to practice in certain areas, and kind of like the ideas that Ms. Yanez was talking about with loan forgiveness and things like that. But it was specific for MDs. It looked like. Is there anything like that that's in the works for other healing arts, or is that may not be your department? I may be asking the wrong person there.
No, absolutely not. So like loaner payment programs, scholarships, that's what we do. So we have several different grant programs that we offer. So usually historically it's been for docs for the most part, but also for RNs and nurse practitioners. But we're actually expanding our portfolio. So for example, we're kind of folding in home and community-based services. So CNAs, home health aides, those folks. So we are expanding our portfolio. I haven't heard anything about the vets or RBTs and RVTs, excuse me. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. I haven't heard that yet, but we are expanding our portfolio. I think there's a big emphasis on health workforce kind of overall. So I think the portfolio is getting bigger, and we're just adding more and more programs.
Thanks. Yeah, if you can, if maybe we can have future discussions about that. I think we have a shortage of veterinarians and RVTs, and currently, at least in my area, people aren't able to find care for their pets in emergency situations. And then there are these care deserts where veterinarians aren't able to practice and make enough money to pay off their loans, but yet many of the consumers in California need access to veterinarians, and so I think this would be a great avenue for us to explore, to see if there's anything that the state can do to help with this situation. So I look forward to talking with you again in the future.
Good.
Thank you
So
for your work.
Thanks. The shortage of providers, is that statewide? This across the board? There's not enough vets, or is that specific to certain areas?
I don't know if Jessica can speak to that. I don't know that we have specific data, but it seems to be across the state. But there's also, in addition to there just being a general shortage or low number, there's specific areas that aren't attracting veterinarians because of the inability to generate income that's enough to pay for their loans. And so if there were some loan forgiveness programs, scholarships, et cetera, grants for startups, I think it would be very helpful in those situations.
Thank you for that. It's helpful.
On that line, according to the bill, how can we help to get veterinary professionals included in the consideration in terms of loans and grants and whatnot? Is that something that is evolving naturally as you proceed, or do we need to do something proactive on our part to add ourselves to?
That's a good question. I think you probably have to be proactive, but we're not. I'm not an advocate, so. But I think you probably have to be proactive. There's a lot of competition for those health workforce dollars. I think loan forgiveness is a really good idea, though. This year in the discussions earlier, but yeah, probably be proactive.
Okay. I mean, I think we can demonstrate that we have tens of millions of consumers that have tens of millions of animals and thousands and thousands of licensees, but not enough to cover everywhere. So thank you so much. And I know we'll work with Jessica to continue to play a part here.
Thank you, everyone.
Do we need to open this up to public comment, Jessica, as a presentation? I assume.
Yes, please.
I assume so. Okay. Then please open it up for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I am opening up the Q&A panel. And if any member of the public would like to comment on this item, please type comment using the field in the lower left-hand corner of the screen and send your comment to all panelists, or else you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, we have Alana Yanez with a comment. So, Alana, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Ross. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was so incredibly needed. Data is so powerful, and it really just speaks to where you have, inequities and lacking. And I think it'll just really help the board and just the state of California and the government really see where we need to invest resources. So I thank you so much for your presentation. I wish I was still on the board to just be there, but I'm beside myself. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to see the results of this data in the next year and the next 2 years. And I think it's really going to lend itself to how we can just dig ourselves out of this inequities that we have in healthcare and in veterinary care. And thank you so much. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. That was really kind. I appreciate that.
All right, the next request for comment is from Anita Levy-Hudson. So Anita, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. I also am very excited to see what can come of this in the future. And I wanted to definitely say I'm an RVT in California, registered veterinary technician, and president-elect of CARVTA. So it's very nice to make your acquaintance. Look forward to working with you more in the future, especially on topics such as this. I did want to throw out there that we're kind of in a lot of flux with RVTs and what we're able to do. We also are in, it's also we also are represented in this healthcare sort of issue with not having enough people, especially in these rural areas. But there's a lot of current legislation and discussion about providing emergency care, RVTs being able to provide emergency care. So I definitely want to mention that and advocate for our representation in these surveys, because we definitely can provide a lot of support to the communities independently, sometimes even of the veterinarians, if those other guidelines that are in place are followed. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think RVTs are included as long as you're part of the DCA licensure process. You guys will be included.
That's correct.
All right, this is a moderator, and I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Ross. I also want to jump in here really quickly to say thank you, Jessica and staff. As soon as this bill was passed, Jessica jumped right in, seeing all the opportunities for our board and the needs that this could serve. So I'm glad she's working closely with you, Ross, and HCI. But anyway, we're very much looking forward to the data and being able to help as much as we can.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good lunch.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, it's 12:30. Why don't we break for an hour lunch? Is that okay with everybody? We still have recess. We still have a number of items to get to before we close for the day, but I think that should work. Unless, Jessica, you know the timing better than I. If an hour works, can we take that?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. See you in an hour.